It's on.
I think we'll get started. Okay, I think we'll start. We're ready. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're about 15 seconds away from the start time. Councillor Jonker is on his way, but we do have a rather long agenda, so I think we'll get started right on time. So, welcome to the Township of West Lincoln Planning, Building, Environmental meeting tonight. This is meeting number 6, held Monday, June 10th, 2019. Note to members of the public that all cell phones, pagers, and/or PDAs should be turned off. And additionally, for your information, we are audio and video recording this meeting. Good timing. Good timing. My name is Cheryl Gannan, and I'll be chairing this meeting tonight. So first of all, I'm going to ask if there are any changes in order of items on the agenda. And seeing none, we'll move on to disclosures of pecuniary interest and/or conflict of interest. Are there any this evening? Okay, seeing none. We have 3 public meetings tonight. So we are going to get started with public meeting number 1. This is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by the Township of West Lincoln with respect to comprehensive zoning bylaw housekeeping amendments. The Planning Act requires in Section 34, subsection 12, that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, Council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by Council in their consideration. The Planning Act requires, through Section 34, subsection 13, that Council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal that decision of Council for the Township of West Lincoln to the local Planning Appeal Tribunal, or LPAT. Would the Deputy Clerk please advise of the method and dates by which notice of the public meeting was given?
Proper notice was provided through local newspaper on May 8th, 2019. Additionally, a yellow sign was posted on the subject property on April 8th, and notice was provided on the Township's website.
Thank you. Will the Planner 2, Garrett Borma, please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed comprehensive zoning bylaw housekeeping amendments? Mr. Borma.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Township of West Lincoln Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw was originally passed in June of 2017, about 2 years ago. And last year, in June of 2018, the Township Council passed a number of minor housekeeping amendments to this bylaw to address some of the minor issues that arose as part of that original zoning bylaw. Township planning staff have recognized that there are still a few outstanding minor gaps and inconsistencies in the current township zoning bylaw, and have again proposed a number of minor housekeeping amendments to the zoning bylaw. Some of these changes include changes to definitions, the definition specifically of a building and structure, to provide staff more guidance on reviewing building permits and addressing zoning compliance, as well as better align the township zoning bylaw to the Ontario Building Code. There's also a proposed change to the kennel provisions that place a limit on the number of dogs permitted in a private and commercial kennel. The number was included in the township's previous zoning bylaw, but was dropped for some reason in the township's current zoning bylaw, so we're reinstating that. Another proposed change includes some clarifications on the regulations of shipping containers to make the bylaw text clearer when it comes to allowing and disallowing shipping containers on certain properties. There are also a number of proposed changes to accessory dwelling units and farm dwelling units. Specifically for farm dwelling units, there is proposed measures to help houses remain secondary to a principal use and ensure that they are needed for the long-term agricultural use on the property. Planning staff are also proposing to increase permitted driveway widths outside of settlement areas from 6 meters to 7.5 meters. And another change proposed is to temporary construction uses by prohibiting mobile homes to be used as dwellings while a dwelling is under construction, a new dwelling on a vacant parcel. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is proposed changes, proposed setbacks for petroleum oil resources, that is like your oil pumps, your natural gas wells, and setbacks to the Smithville sewage lagoons to align our zoning bylaw to our official plan, because our official plan has requirements for setbacks. So now we're just implementing those in the zoning bylaw. And then there's a number of other minor site-specific amendments that we are proposing on specific sites where the zoning doesn't quite align with what was thought of at the time of when a zoning bylaw was put in place. And all those changes, proposed changes, are in that table in the report, and that report was put on the township website. We received no public comments to date, except from those few landowners who have expressed their desire to have their zoning changed through the housekeeping process, as well as we received comments from the region of Niagara saying that they have no objection to any of the proposed changes. Planning staff therefore recommend that a recommendation report be prepared once all agency and public comments have been received at a future Planning, Building, and Environment Committee meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to ask if there are any oral or written submissions from members of the public regarding this proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to this? Okay, seeing none, are there any members of council who wish to ask a question about this? Mayor Bilsma?
So I'd like to just ask the question of Mr. Boomer, through you, Madam Chair. The removal of temporary, say, mobile home for the purposes of construction, I'd like to ask about that one first. What was the concerns that we're trying to remediate by disallowing mobile homes as temporary dwellings for construction?
Through you, Madam Chair, the intention was to not allow for someone to place a mobile home on a property, on a vacant residential or agricultural property during the time that they're going to construct their first and new dwelling. There were in the previous zoning bylaw provisions that kind of stated more prohibited it, and the current zoning bylaw, its language, you can kind of read into it that it is prohibited, but it's not very clear. So we just want to make that more clear, that in the case where you're coming to a vacant residential property and you wish to build a new dwelling, that a mobile home is not permitted for you to live on the property until that dwelling is completed, and that's to avoid septic requirement issues. This council's, I think, had experience on an application in the past where some of these became issues, where individuals wanted to put a mobile home on a property and there were some septic related issues that we had to work around because it wasn't quite contemplated in this zoning bylaw. So I think that's the intention. I don't know if Brian has more to add to that or not, but.
Mr. Treble, would you like to add to that?
I guess just to confirm that this committee, I don't think dealt with it. I think it was previous council and committee. There was an application in Abingdon for a property where they actually moved the mobile home on and then asked for forgiveness after it was already situated. But of course, in that situation, as Mr. Bourne is alluding to, it did not have proper septic systems and the whole bit. So if we're going to allow it, it's better to go through a public process and make it sort of tidy up front, as opposed to allowing them to do it as a sort of backdoor approach. Because it's not ideal to have temporary facilities usually scattered throughout the township. It's usually desirable to have a more permanent residential style accommodation unit on the property.
Okay, thank you.
So then further, what I just heard in there was a little bit of an opportunity that maybe as part of a site plan, so that it is definitely determined to be of a temporary nature. Through the process, there could be an exception that is made that would allow for a mobile home. Like I think of the markets being what they are. Sometimes, young families, people starting out might just have the opportunity to make something work, but there's that kind of temporary nature where they had to sell a property in order to satisfy banks and loans and those kinds of things, where really the only course of action might be to find a temporary dwelling, and in order to maintain certain, financial qualifications and stipulations, they have to kind of find a temporary solution. And I want to make sure that while it's not granted immediately, that we have the controls in place, that still, as part of a building application or a site plan agreement, perhaps a temporary home could be allowed at the discretion of this council, of course, meeting certain standards. So I just want to, did I hear that?
Okay, I think Mr. Tribble would like to speak to that.
So the way it is proposed, the control would effectively be a public rezoning process to allow it to occur. And there's two instances, I guess. Mr. Bourne is referring to in the first instance where you have a raw piece of land and they're proposing a dwelling for the first time. And usually that's a sort of a permanent structure of some description for dwelling purposes. But then we have the concept of garden suites or granny suites or whatever term you want to give those, that are allowed for up to 20 years. Those can be of a more portable nature as long as they're for season in their ability to accommodate housing. But slightly different process in each case. The garden suite grandfathered one is a temporary zoning bylaw amendment under the Planning Act. The first ones could be permanent or temporary depending on the desire of committee and council.
Okay, then just through you, Madam Chair, I wanted to address the issue of shipping containers. Situation kind of occurred where, again, in the issue, a situation where there was a building permit issued and a site plan was agreed upon to build a first home on a building lot in the countryside, and the idea was that a shipping container could be used as a kind of a construction starting point, most specifically to hold an electrical service, to basically mount an electrical service, a temporary electrical service, until the house could be completed to the point where it could be transferred to the house, and provide security for equipment, materials on site, seeing as how the countryside is largely unsecured, and just an opportunity for the homeowner to put various equipment in a secure place. Would this bylaw, these housekeeping items, still prevent that? I think that was a legitimate opportunity, and I want to make sure that as part of a site plan agreement that we could have a temporary shipping container or some kind of structure in place for the purposes of construction, temporary in nature, or an understanding agreed to. So does this still allow that, or will it prohibit that?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, we're not proposing any changes to that provision. That provision states still that with a valid building permit, you can have a shipping container for construction purposes. So sometimes there's some discussion about the building permit stage, because they sometimes want to bring it before they have the valid building permit, but the valid building permit is probably an appropriate measure to ensure that they're actually going to build what they want instead of just bring shipping containers on the subject property. What we're proposing to change is add in the agricultural area, to add an additional use that shipping containers are also allowed, not just for agricultural uses, but agriculturally related uses. And we're just trying to clear up that shipping containers on a more permanent basis are only allowed on lots that have a minimum of 4 hectares. Now, that wording was already in the bylaw, but some people could maybe take it to read between 0 to 4 hectares, you're allowed 1 shipping container. Meanwhile, the bylaw was trying to read 4 hectares. If you have 4 hectares, then you are permitted to have 1 for agricultural uses. So you need to have a minimum threshold of 4 hectares. So that's the intention of these zoning bylaw changes.
I mean, no further. Thank you very much.
Okay, the others are waiting. Councillor Rayner, do you still have a question?
Yes, through you to Councillor Barima. With regards to that mobile home, what about a contractor who places his unit there for 2 reasons? Number one is kind of the headquarters in order to do the project, and number 2, the possibility of an employee that would stay there in order to ensure the security of the site. because we have a lot of areas in West Lincoln that are wide open, and we know what goes on at West Lincoln when it gets dark.
Mr. Varma?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll try to answer this, and I can defer off to Mr. Trebell again. Our temporary construction provisions in our zoning bylaw allow for temporary construction offices to be located. I don't know if that would include a living space for our employees. I don't believe it does, but I'll let Mr. Trebell speak to that.
Director?
Madam Chair, at this point in time, it'd be the same kind of issue we talked about earlier with the mayor's inquiry. I think allowing somebody to live in a shipping container or some other sort of portable unit leads to the same questions of proper sewage disposal and whatnot. So it's not contemplated in the language before us tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councillor
For
Rainey.
you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Trouble, because it is not the owner of the property who is staying there, and because it's in the vested interest of both the contractor who doesn't lose his equipment and the person who owns the property doesn't see their property damaged, if a portable unit were put there, which is used in a lot of fun fairs and everything else, and is pumped out on a regular basis to ensure that the main concern, which has been, and I was around when the issues in Abington were discussed, and it was mainly dealing with the septic situation, that would clearly deal with it. Would that satisfy?
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Chairman.
excuse me, I guess my thought would be as follows. It's probably no harm done should a travel trailer be pulled in temporarily for the purposes of somebody to reside on the property for a convenient short period of time, but I don't know that the township necessarily has a mechanism by which we could approve that. So it would be one of those bylaw enforcement matters where unless we got a written complaint, I don't know that we would necessarily act on it, but I'm not sure that I have tools necessary that we can just issue a permit for some sort of a temporary facility on the site.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rainey, are you finished?
Madam
You
Chair,
know-
the reason I am asking that is because in the Caister area, it's very common to have car fires in the middle of the night. I've had 4 on my property in the years that I've lived there, and about 5 or 6 beside my property. So anybody who builds out there would be susceptible to the same possible damage, except to their structure that they're building or to any equipment that's left out there. When it's pitch black, there's no lights, and there's no houses around. It's just inviting a situation, and the only way to prevent that is to have security of some kind. So that would be the reason I would say that hopefully this could be an exception to the bylaw. And it could be recorded. I mean, there's nothing stopping the contractor from coming to the town and saying, I'm putting a unit on this that we've already received the permit from the township, and the specified build of this property is the length of time that that unit will be on there if it deems necessary. And once occupation permit has been received, that will be removed. Not much different, I think, than if you had a house, an old house on the property, which has happened many times. There was a deposit put on that. It used to be like $1,000 or $5,000, and you were building your new home right beside this old one, and there's one just occurred last year at the end of Caister Center in South Chippewa, where they built a brand-new home. The Century home was within 50 feet of it, and they finished their new home, and when they got the occupancy, they tore the old house down. So there's no difference between that situation, which was security for them during the building of their new home, and a contractor, not the owner putting his own thing, but the contractor putting it on there to ensure his stuff and the person that he's building for are safe. No different than having an old home that you're going to tear down. It's removed at the end of the project. The mobile home's removed at the end of the project.
Mr. Treble, you want to speak to that?
Just briefly, Madam Chair, now that we've had some discussion through the public forum, staff can take this issue under advisement and report back on possible ways to deal with it in the future rec report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, actually back to Mr. Treble there. My question, I guess, is, with the way how it's currently written, would this affect a more of a, sorry, let me rephrase that. can a shipping container be used as a primary material for building a residence? Because there are shipping container homes. I believe there's at least a few of them in Niagara, at least one that I could think of that I saw online. That's at least, I think it's in the St. Catharines, Niagara Falls area. So I was just curious if that can be used as a primary material to build a permanent residence.
Through you, Madam Chair, the language, I believe, as written in the bylaw, allows it as the accessory structure to a principal use on the property, mainly in the agricultural area. We did have discussions several years ago about the possibility of allowing them as principal residences, but we haven't quite got to the point of actually having it as a provision for permitting it immediately without a public process in the bylaw right now. So it could be done through a public process. It would just be somewhat unique from your traditional.
So somebody would have to
dwelling.
apply and
Yeah.
you'd have to go. Okay. No, I just want to make sure that that option is still available. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cody.
And through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Trouble, how long does someone have to complete the building process if they're building their first home on a property?
Through you, Madam Chair, once a building permit is issued, I believe you have something like 6 months to actually start working on the project. And then as long as you're working on the project, you could keep a permit alive for years.
Right, okay. So the few have probably ruined it for the many in this situation, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Am I?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I missed part of that.
Would
I
you
just,
repeat that, please?
I'm assuming that we've had issues with this, and this is where this bylaw came from, and that's what we're trying to avoid in the future?
Through you, Madam Chair, there is this perception, feeling, I'm not sure what the right word is, but that temporary residential units or mobile home units are not necessarily the desired type of residential accommodation to be scattered throughout the township. So, and you know, certainly standards have changed over the years. Mobile homes of today are totally different than mobile homes of days gone by and whatnot. But I think the bottom line is that right now, there's two issues, I guess, sort of the nature of the structure as well as the proper sewage disposal piece of the puzzle and of course the cistern or water supply that goes with it too. So the bylaw is not and has not contemplated sort of temporary accommodations. Short of a residence existing that's being replaced with a new residence, you're allowed to stay in that one until the point of occupation of the new residence, as Councillor Rayner alluded to. But otherwise, they're not permitted or supported at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Trouble, for all of that. Okay, fine. All right, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because before I ask members of council, because there was no one from the public who spoke, I should have put this in. So I'm going to do that now. I would like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, if any members of the public would like to make comments and or provide written comments, they should state them or present them now, as the LPAT may not consider comments made during any other council and or committee meetings. Also, anyone wishing to speak are required to come forward to the microphone at the table and provide their name and address for the record prior to speaking. I did notice that some people came into the room afterwards. So of the people who came in after this part of the public meeting started, if there's anyone who wishes to speak to this particular public meeting, looking at the housekeeping amendments. Okay, seeing no one, then I'm going to move on. Please note that members of committee must make their comments now, as the LPAT may not consider comments made during a planning, building, environmental meeting and or any other council or committee meetings. Please be advised that a technical report is being considered by committee this evening and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future planning committee and or council meeting. Please be advised that once the council, I need to go on to the second page, sorry, and or council has made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There's an attendance sign-in sheet which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's committee meeting that you place a check mark in the column marked zoning bylaw amendments if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and or decisions on this matter. Therefore, people who are interested in observing council and or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend the meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a council and or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-up sheet. This public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is concluded at the hour of 6:54. So as I stated earlier, we have 3 public meetings, so we'll now begin the second public meeting of the evening. This is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Surinder Singh Dhaliwal, owner, Niagara Planning Group NPG agent, Heather Sewell. The Planning Act requires in Section 34, subsection 12, that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration. The Planning Act requires, through Section 34, subsection 13, that council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, or LPAT. Would the Deputy Clerk advise of the method and dates by which notice of the public meeting was given?
Proper notice was given by way of public notice sent out on May 8th, 2019. Additionally, a yellow sign was posted on the subject property, and notice was provided on the township's website.
Thank you. Will the planner 2, Madison Etzel, please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed comprehensive zoning bylaw? Oh, my goodness. I have the second page with that. Yeah. It's the same as number 2 on the other one. Excuse us a moment, please. So my page 2 is the same as the page 2 of the first one. Okay, we can go to the top, and we can do it that way. I'm sure that Madison knows what she's going to be doing. So we are not looking at the housekeeping amendments, obviously. Yeah, it says the same thing, see? So the backup copy said the same thing. So Ms. Etzel, would you please explain what this file is about in terms of Mr. Dhaliwal, who's interested in a zoning amendment? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. An application for rezoning has been made by Heather Sewell of Niagara Planning Group on behalf of Mr. Dhaliwal for the property municipally known as 9006 Highway 20. The application has been made to permit the development of a gas station and drive-through on the subject property. The property is currently zoned service commercial, C3, and agricultural. However, to facilitate the proposed development, the applicant is requesting to expand the existing C3 service commercial zone. Relief is also being requested to allow a reduction in the required MDS1 setbacks from the neighboring livestock facilities. The applicant wishes to reduce the required setback from 321 meters to 213 meters to the closest barn to the west, and to reduce the setback from 596 meters to 530 meters to the closest active livestock operation to the south. The property is approximately 1 acre in size, 0.40 hectares, and is currently vacant. The lands were previously used for a motor vehicle gas bar until 1990 when the facility burnt down. Since that time, the property has been used on and off over the years to store motor vehicles. The applicant is proposing a 287 square meter, 3,089 square foot gas station with a drive-through. The region is requesting a 7.44 meter road widening along Regional Road 20 and a 15 meter by 50 meter visibility triangle at the corner on this property. This will make the resulting subject property 0.990 acres, 0.36 hectares in size. The proposed development will cover an approximate 8% of the total lot area. A request for comments was circulated to township departments, prescribed agencies, and neighboring owners on May 8th, and a public notice sign was posted on May 21st. Township Public Works staff, municipal drainage superintendent, septic inspector, and building department have no objections to this application. The Niagara region has no objections, however, they are requesting the road allowance and site triangle. Planning staff received 2 public comments at the time of writing this report. We also received a 3rd comment this afternoon. These comments outline fencing requirements, drainage, landscaping, traffic lighting, lot size, and septic requirements. Planning staff will continue to collect comments, and a recommendation report will be prepared by township staff following input from today's meeting and will be brought to a future planning committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any oral or written submissions from anyone present regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? And I did not ask if Ms. Sewell was here. Okay, did you want to do something further in regards to what Ms. Edsel had presented, or was that satisfactory to you? Well, please come. Please come.
Please forgive me, it's my first time here
No, well,
in
welcome.
Township, and I'm just new logistically, so just give me a moment.
That's okay. Get yourself organized. We're
Thank
fine.
you. So I just click, okay. So yes, good evening, Mayor, council members, and members of the committee. My name is Heather Sewell, and I'm a planner with Niagara Planning Group. We are a planning consulting firm out of Niagara Falls. And I'm here to represent our client, Mr. Dhaliwal and his wife, for the property municipally known as 9006 Highway 20. I have prepared a presentation, and I'll be available to answer any questions that you may have. Is it plugged in? Okay. I'll keep, thanks. So, as I said, the subject lands are located at 9006 Highway 20, and we have been hired to prepare a zoning bylaw amendment application for the property to establish a motor vehicle gasoline bar and drive-through facility. A private on-site water and sewage system will be provided to service the proposed development. The lands are located, as I said, on Highway 20, and they have a frontage of approximately 33 meters and a total area of approximately 0.4 hectares. The lands are located just outside the boundary of Fulton, and the surrounding uses consist of commercial to the north, agricultural to the east, a single detached dwelling to the south, and agriculture to the west. The subject lands were previously used for a motor vehicle gas bar until approximately 1990 when it burnt down. The location of the former gas station can be seen in the air photo on the left, and we put a red rectangle around it because it is an older photo, but it's in the center of the rectangle approximately. Over 30 years, it's been over 30 years since the fire, and the site has been used on and off to store motor vehicles, which is shown in the image on the right. As of right now, essentially all the motor vehicles have been removed since the application was submitted, and it's essentially an underutilized brownfield site. So the lands are currently designated as good general agriculture, and they are zoned as service commercial and agriculture. We're proposing a zoning bylaw amendment to expand the existing C3 that currently exists on the subject lands to allow for the proposed development. And so essentially 75% of the site will be zoned as service commercial, and the remaining 25%, as shown on the image towards the back where the septic field will remain as agriculture. That's what we're proposing. And then just as some minor housekeeping matters, we also put some particular regulations in with regards to lot area, lot frontage, and landscape open space. As part of the proposed development, we will require an MDS1 reduction. So an MDS study has been done as part of the application process. Thanks. So in conclusion, and in summary, the proposed development in my opinion, represents good land use planning. It is consistent with the PPS and conforms with the growth plan, the regional official plan, and the town of West Lincoln official plan. And it essentially provides an opportunity to utilize an existing piece of land that was once used for the same use. And it can service the local residents of Fulton, passers-by, the agricultural community, as well as the agritourism community. So I believe it's in the public interest, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll move on and we'll see about the public, and then we'll come back and we'll ask you to come again if members of council have.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Okay, so are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment, either written or oral, on this application? Would you come forward, please? And if you'll state your name and your address.
Hi,
Thank
Madam
you.
Chair. I'm Frank DeFilippis and council members. We own the property just to the east of where this proposed gas station is. We've been business owners there for the last 54 years. We do welcome new businesses, but our concern is that corner. There is a lot of traffic issues there, sight lines. And the biggest concern is to the east and to the west of this property. The region, or at that time, which would have been the provincial government, took expropriated a road widening of 20 meters. So we're wondering why the region is only asking for 7.4 meters of road widening when there's already existing 20 meters on either side of the property. At that time, when they took the land, we weren't compensated, so we lost almost 2 acres of our farm to this road widening. So if the region has no intention of widening this highway, then they should give it back to the landowners. And also, like our big concern there too is we might want a traffic light. And it doesn't really state here what type of drive-through. It just says a drive-through. Is it a coffee, or is this groceries, or is it food? Because different types of drive-through create a lot more traffic. As you can see, like a Tim Hortons drive-through, there's a lot of traffic issues. And especially 18 Road is obviously 50 Road, which is your access to QEW. So that's our main concerns for that.
Okay, thank you. Do you have, I know that you sent a letter.
Yes.
Are all of
so-
your points included in your letter so that they will be captured?
No, so I didn't realize about the road widening there.
Okay,
until after,
okay.
So I could submit another.
If you would, that will make sure that's entered into the minutes.
Okay.
That would be great. If you have it written now, you could just give it to the clerk. And if,
I don't.
Okay, fair enough. You'll get it to her, right? Okay, thank you so much. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this file? This way. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'd like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, if any members of the public would like to make comments and or provide written comments, they should state them or present them now, as the LPAT may not consider comments made during any other council and or committee meetings. Also, anyone wishing to speak are required to come forward to the microphone at the table and provide their name and address for the record prior to speaking. So, seeing no further, members of committee, this will be your turn. Do any members of committee have any oral or written submissions on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Please note that members of committee must make their comments now, as the LPAT may not consider comments made during a planning, building, environmental meeting and or any other council or committee meetings. So, Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple comments I have on this application. I did, campaigning in that area after I inherited that section of that ward. That became my ward now, inheriting that area. You know, that intersection there was the existing Fulton gas station, which I attended regularly, obviously to fill up gas and, you know, get miscellaneous things. And the one issue that there was always there was sight lines, especially coming from, I'd say, coming south, turning on Highway 20. It was always a tough transition trying to make the turn there. But it was also coming south. And now that we're going to be heading north, to make that cross across Highway 20 without a stoplight. I'm surprised that the region's comments didn't say that they're implementing a four-way traffic light, because a lot of the obviously complaints I had with a lot of the residents there was that they were requesting for a traffic light there due to the high volume of traffic, due to people using that as a major artery to get to the QEW. I use it because I live on the other side of South Grimsby 18 on 16, and when I have to use the QEW, and now that obviously Costco's there, and you know my wife wants to drive to Costco all the time, everybody's going down to Costco. So it's a busy, busy street. To put a gas bar, yeah, you know, I promote business. It's not that I'm against that, but without a traffic light, for people to come in a double entrance, one from Highway 20, one from South Grimsby 18, it does congest that area an incredible amount. And I knew that was a big issue with, of course, the gas station across. And obviously, the other question I had was, you know, I guess to piggyback even what the resident, Mr. DeFilippis said was, you know, what's going in the building? Are we getting another mechanic shop again? Are we getting, it says an accessory building, but what's going in the building? Is it going to be, you know, a Tim Hortons? Is it going to be a gas bar with a variety store? Those questions I have. But my main concern is a traffic light. I'm surprised that the region's comments weren't really implementing one there for a four-way traffic light. And I find it very concerning because it's really going to congest that corner and potential for some pretty serious accidents. So I'd like some further comment back from the region on why it hasn't been implemented at all. So I don't know if, through you, Madam Chair, to Madison or Mr. Treble, if that region hasn't commented on anything on a traffic light at all.
I see Ms. Edsel shaking her head. No, there's nothing that you can see there. I didn't see it when I read through either, but Mr. Treble, are you aware of anything going on with that?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, not specific from the region, but this between Tech and Iraq gives us a chance to explore and flush this out and be able to speak to the matter more clearly in the recommendation report. The one thing I did notice was at the top of page 8 of the staff report, which is page 149 of the agenda package, it does say that we've had discussions about requiring a transportation impact study brief at the site plan stage. But I think I'm hearing that we need answers now as part of the zoning stage. So the site plan won't be quite adequate enough, and we'll explore.
Well, as you head, sorry to interrupt there, through Madam Chair, well, as you head further east, you know, we have the other Esso station there, and it has a traffic light, and there's a lot of traffic that goes into the other Esso station there on, it was Mountain Street, if I'm corrected there. So, you know, I think the region needs to comment on this. I think the region needs to get back to us on implementing a traffic light. I think it'd be a big issue if it gets to be, especially if they put, let's say if they decide to put a Tim Hortons on the run there. There'll be a lot of traffic, a lot of people stop for their morning coffees, and it can be really heavy intersection there. So I'd like the region to comment back and report back to council on that and about implementing a traffic light, Madam Chair. So.
Okay, I think our director has indicated to us very clearly that between this technical report and a recommendation report, there's time to further explore that. It's been well heard. It's been brought up by both you and the residents, so I think that's certainly something to look into.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rayner.
Thank you very much. I just lived down the road across from Okimi's when that store was there before it burnt down, so I can still remember when it was there. But as they would say, I guess that's because I'm kind of long in the tooth. But anyways, the point is that is a very accident-prone intersection. And I understand what Councillor Trebetta has said, and the region, like in Font Hill, loves to put stoplights in, and it does impede the nice flow of traffic on Highway 20 to do that. My concern is the location of this place, because it is such a bad corner. I don't really know if it's a good fit or not. We've got the feed mill on the one side. We did have the store on the opposite side, and then that closed down. But there has been some horrific accidents there. Mind you, most of them were caused because people did not pay attention to their driving. When you pull out on Highway 20 from 50 Road and you don't look both ways and you get T-boned, that kind of would happen no matter where you were. It's part of good driving. So not necessarily a stoplight can stop most of the accidents which are caused by people not paying attention. So there's due responsibility by the driver also. But it is a bad corner, and people go a lot faster than 80 kilometers. And that's why I'm a little concerned with putting another store there, which is just going to increase the congestion in that corner. So I'm not at this point comfortable with this.
Okay, well, you don't need to be. It's just
I know,
a time
I
to
know.
ask your questions,
I
so
know,
that's
but
fine.
Having been to the, I used to go to Fulton all the time. That's where I got my gas all the time. When it closed, it was a shame in a way. But I don't know if there's been any serious accidents since it's closed. I believe it closed right at the end of December, 2 years ago, I think. But there has been some very bad accidents there. But like I said, most of it was human error.
Okay, so we've referred to it, or you have referred to it as a bad corner. I think perhaps that's something we need to actually know, is whether there's data. I mean, sometimes people have an assumption about something because there's been an accident or two within a certain area, but I think we certainly need to find out if the traffic reports actually indicate that that is a problem. I also remember when there was a gas station on both sides, and but the traffic along Highway 20 has changed, so perhaps it's time to investigate what really is happening there. Are there any further comments or questions from members of committee? Okay. Please be advised that a technical report is being considered by committee this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future planning committee and or council meeting. Please be advised that once the planning committee and or council has made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There is an attendance sign-in sheet which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's committee meeting that you place a check mark in the column marked Dhaliwal if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and or decisions on this matter. Therefore, people who are interested in observing council and or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend the meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a council and or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-up sheet. This public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is concluded at the hour of 7:16 p.m. I'm just going to go to here. Yeah, I saw that. Okay, moving on to the third meeting of the evening, public meeting. This is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by zoning bylaw amendment, Fred and Joyce Bosher, application for rezoning, and the application for draft plan of condominium Sunset Acres by IBI Group agent. The Planning Act requires in Section 34, subsection 12, that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration. The Planning Act requires through Section 34, subsection 13, that council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal that decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the local planning appeal tribunal. Will the deputy clerk advise of the method and dates by which the notice of the public meeting was given, please?
Proper notice was given by way of public notice sent out on May 7th, 2019. Additionally, a yellow sign was posted on the subject property on April 8th, and notice was provided on the township's website.
Okay, so this time, Planner to Garrett Borma. Please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed application for the rezoning. First of all, we have amendment for Fred and Joyce Bosher application for rezoning and the application for draft plan of condominium Sunset Acres IBI Group agent. Mr. Borma, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. An application for rezoning and draft plan of vacant land condominium was submitted to the township on April 25th, 2019 by IBI Group and Fred and Joyce Bosher for their properties known as 2942 and 2946 Grimsby Road, Regional Road 12. The properties are located on the west side of Grimsby Road, north of Highway 20, within the Regional Road 12 hamlet. The two lots currently contain a single detached dwelling where Fred and Joyce Bosher live, an automotive repair establishment owned and operated by Mr. Fred Bosher, as well as accessory buildings. The applications were submitted with some background documents and studies, including a hydrogeological study, a plan and justification report, a preliminary concept and grading plan, a geotechnical report, and a stormwater management brief. The landowners and IBI Group have submitted these applications to create 4 new residential parcels of land through a draft plan of vacant land condominium. Each of the proposed residential lots is approximately 1.5 acres in size, and if I can ask the Deputy Clerk to just throw it on the screen so everyone can see. Each of these parcels is approximately 1.5 acres in size and will be serviced by a private condominium roadway, as you can see here. Private water cisterns and private individual septic systems. Prior to the completion of the condominium application, planning staff are recommending that a minor boundary adjustment be approved and completed to address a landlocked piece of land, which will be created through the condominium plan. It's a little difficult to see, but it is a sliver of land down where the mouse currently is shown on the screen. A site plan application will also be required prior to any development. Surrounding the subject property are agricultural lands to the east and the west, including a number of poultry barns, residential lands to the east and north, a commercial industrial lands to the south. The applicants have completed a sensitive land use report to address potential land use conflicts in this area that could arise from this development. Planning staff have received several written comments from agencies and the public. The agency comments included comments from Superior Propane, which is located northeast of this property, requesting that the Township Fire Department prepare a letter to them that this application will not impact their RSMP approval, which has something to do with their fire fighting abilities, and that sensitive land uses such as daycares and nurseries not be permitted in this development. Several comments from neighboring residences were also received, mainly concerning drainage. Township Public Works has provided comments with regards to the proposed drainage as well. An open house was also held on June 4th, where members of the public, 2 members of the public attended and also voiced concern over drainage. Township staff has had extensive comments with the applicant and their consultant over the drainage issues that have come to light. A full stormwater management report has been requested by the township in a future site plan application for this particular development to hopefully address some of these concerns and provide a solution that provides adequate drainage for this area and this development. 2 poultry farmers also submitted comments after the technical report was prepared, and those comments, I believe, were placed on your desk, as well as one of the comments from a neighboring resident. And these comments requested that a clause be inserted to protect, clause be inserted in the site plan agreement, which would add a warning clause on the sale agreements of these individual lots created concerning the agricultural uses in the area, that there are agricultural uses in the nearby vicinity that generate noise, odor, dust, as well as spraying that goes on. And the region also provided comments with a similar request that a similar warning clause be added. So planning staff are investigating those clauses. Planning staff have not had an opportunity to fully evaluate these comments and all the agency and public comments at this time, but will ensure that these comments are adequately reviewed and that a synopsis of those comments be prepared in a future recommendation report to this committee. Planning staff has completed also a preliminary review of the planning policy with regards to this application. Lots are permitted to be created through a plan of condominium within a hamlet settlement area with a minimum lot size of 1 hectare on lots that don't have municipal water and sewer services. However, applicants can undertake a hydrogeological study to identify and justify that smaller lot sizes are adequate to handle the private septic systems. So a hydrogeological study was submitted, and the township and the region reviewed it both and have no objections to that report that suggests that 1.5 acre lots can be achieved and they can be properly serviced with private septic systems. The applicant has proposed that they be serviced by private septic systems and private water cisterns. In addition to the draft plan of condominium application, the applicants are seeking a zoning bylaw amendment to address a number of zoning bylaw deficiencies, most of these having to do with the existing buildings on the existing residential parcel, the accessory buildings. There are 3 zoning exceptions being asked for, one having to do with the maximum size of one of the accessory buildings, and the other having to do with the number of accessory buildings on the property and the proximity to the main dwelling. All of these buildings, planning staff believe, were constructed according to the zoning bylaw at the time when these buildings were constructed. So it's not an issue. It's just we're recognizing that these do not comply with the current zoning bylaw. And then the other zoning exceptions have to do with the private roadway and frontage onto Grimsby Road and Regional Road 12. Planning staff are still reviewing all of the agency and public comments. These comments will be fully evaluated prior to the preparation and presentation of any recommendation report to this committee. And drainage, as previously noted, is a major concern, and we are working with the applicants to find solutions for the drainage issues. And the applicants' agents are here this evening and do have a presentation for you as well. I think that they wish to share. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Borm. I was going to ask that. So then the agents for the applicant may come forward now, if you would, please.
Good evening, Councillor, Chair, and public. I am Angela Bonamici, agent on behalf of, with IBI Group, the agent on behalf of the owners of Sunset Acres, Mr. Fred and Joyce Bosher. And we are here to provide an overview of our proposal and provide any clarification required for our proposed development. So here are the subject properties, which are municipally known as 2942 Grimsby Road and 2946 Grimsby Road. They have a combined frontage of 92.4 meters and a combined area of 4.57 hectares. They are located along Grimsby Road and just to the north of Regional Road 20. There are, as Garrett previously mentioned, to the north and east, there are existing residential uses. There is a agricultural use to the east of the property as well. To the west, there is a municipal road allowance that's, well, just a municipal road allowance and another poultry barn. And to the south is Erie Powder Coatings and Alden Equipment. Here's a better view of the subject properties. 2942, which is the, I guess, most southerly, which wraps around Bosher's Auto. That has a frontage along Grimsby Road of 66.56 meters and an area of 3.6 hectares. And it consists of a 2-story single detached dwelling, which is actually the home of the owners, Fred and Joyce. And then 2946 is home to Bosher's Auto Shop. It has a frontage of 25.79 meters and an area of 0.97 hectares. And our proposal is basically to add 4 single detached lots to the rear portion of 2942 Grimsby Road, which will have access through a private driveway that will connect to Bosher's Auto Shop through the existing driveway onto Regional Road 20, or Grimsby Road, sorry. So the applications we submitted in support of our proposal is a draft plan of vacant land condominium, which will allow for the 4 lots and tie into the existing driveway for access to these 4 lots. The zoning bylaw amendment we provided is to modify the existing uses, as Garrett mentioned. There is currently, what we are proposing conforms to the existing zone that is on the property. Our zoning bylaw is just to recognize existing structures and existing conditions on the commercial lot and the residential lot. We are also submitting a severance for a land consolidation. This is between the auto shop property and the existing residence. Basically, when that was first severed from the property as a whole, the lot line was created by the town. It was kind of just an arbitrary line, which the homeowners would kind of like to correct more towards their liking of how they would like their lot to be configured. And we will be submitting a future site plan application, which will provide more detail to the grading and to the road design. So to support our application, we commissioned various studies. The first being a geotechnical report. This was completed by SoilMat, and this was to look at the existing pavement structure and to provide recommendation for the pavement structure that needs to go in to support the development. We also did a noise study, which was completed by DBA Consulting, and what they assessed the surrounding stationary noise sources. These included Bosch's Auto Service, Seacard RV, Alden Equipment, and Erie Powder Coatings, and they came to the conclusions that they have no impact on our proposal from a noise source. IBI completed a stormwater management brief, to which the assessment is that the majority of the lands currently drain southwest and will continue to drain southwest. However, there is an existing drainage problem in the northeast corner of the property, which our proposal is to remedy this through a swale on our property that will run along the side lot lines from the northeast corner down the eastern lot line and out to Grimsby Road. I'll speak more to this and give you, there'll be a visual to help you. We also commissioned a scoped hydrogeological report, which was completed by WSP. They determined that through the private septic systems, 1.5 acre lots can be supported. We also had a sensitive land use study completed by AirZone. They assessed the uses in the area that could affect residential uses. It came back that only 2 looked to be of concerns to investigate, that being Erie Powder Coating and Bosch's Auto. Through their investigation, it was determined that Erie Powder Coating has a certificate of approval through the Environmental Protection Act, which they have to adhere to, and so they are in compliance. And Bosch's Auto has, the way they are operating right now, has no impact on the proposed development. And then we provided a planning justification report, which ties in all these supporting studies and also provides justification from a provincial policy standpoint that supports this development. Well, that's not the slide. Okay. So this is the slide previously was the draft plan that Garrett showed, and all I really wanted to show, Garrett, can you go back, please? One more, see if it works. No. So where it says lot addition, I'm going to show you, that is this portion of land right here, which all that we want to do is kind of square up their existing residential. There's land on the Bosch's Auto that really isn't being utilized and, would be preferred on the existing residence. With the reduction to Bosch's Auto Service, we asked WSP to look at that and to confirm that the reduction in that size won't have any effect in terms of a sanitary, and they confirmed that it's fine. It's not a big enough reduction to have any impact. So, through comments from residents and the town, there were some planning issues that were of concern, the first being traffic, compatibility with the surrounding, and drainage and grading. With traffic, we are only proposing 4 new single detached lots. They are within a hamlet, and they are having access through an existing driveway. They do have frontage on a regional road, which has adequate road capacity, and there are no sightline issues. We received regional comments, and they did not have any concerns in terms of asking for a traffic brief or traffic study. With compatibility, as I mentioned before, we did complete a sensitive land use study by AirZone. And as I said, there were only 2 uses that they wanted to investigate, that being Erie Powder Coatings and Bosch's Auto Service, which they concluded have no adverse impacts on our proposal. There are no agricultural concerns as well. We are in a settlement area, therefore we don't apply to MDS standards. But it should also be noted that our property lines, as they exist now, is for a residential dwelling. So we're not getting any closer than the existing already is. And as well, we are a compatible use with Bosch's Auto in terms of using that same driveway access. That being that when families are at the home, Bosch's Auto Service is closed. And when they're at work and school, that's when the hours of Bosch's Auto is operating. And new homes, we are envisioning to be in character with the existing homes. So basically, I believe there's bungalows, and I think our clients are hoping to have bungalows as well in that area. They're not looking to create these massive monster homes, but also they can't be supported based on the sewage. That's how it's determined. And drainage. So we did submit a pre-grading and stormwater management brief, and it did show that there is an existing drainage problem in the northeast corner. How we are proposing to remedy this is to provide a swale along the property line on our property to clear the water through, run down the property line, and out to Regional Road, Grimsby Road. We are going to contain our own drainage as well, which will outlet to the southeast, out to Regional Road system. We are not going to drain any of our stuff into the adjacent landowners, and we have been told that there is potential that the existing drainage problem can be remedied through cooperation with the town and neighbors to help resolve this issue. So we are working with the town on that to figure that out. So this is an excellent site for hamlet infilling. We're within the settlement area. We're going to build similar built form to the existing. We're a complementary use to the commercial use. We comply to West Lincoln's official plan and are consistent with provincial policies. So that's my presentation, and if you have any questions, that's them here.
Okay. I think once again we'll reserve questions. We'll hear from members of the public, and then we'll come back if we need to ask you questions, Ms. Bonamici. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to ask now if there are any oral or written submissions from anyone present regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. I'd like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, if members of the public would like to make comments and or provide written comments, they should state them or present them now, as the LPAT may not consider comments made during any other council and or committee meetings. Also, anyone wishing to speak is required to come forward to the microphone at the table and provide their name and address for the record prior to speaking. So is there anyone from the public who would like to speak to this file? Okay, come forward, please, sir.
Hi, John Petropoulos, 7423 Highway 20, Smithville, and we own the farm right on the west side.
Okay.
So just looking at it real quick, in addition to letter already provided, fencing will have to be provided to maintain as tractors and equipment run through there that nobody can run out there. and safety for everybody, residents and the equipment operators. That'll be, I'm just looking at it now for the first time, and that'll be a key issue. There'll need to be some kind of a fencing system to make sure that nothing can interfere with one to the other.
Okay.
And previous comments, as per the letter, MDS, Brian and I have talked about. Understanding it's to the Hamlet lot line, it's still a concern for the farming end of it.
Okay, anything further, Mr. Petropoulos? No?
Yep, well, the rest of it's in the letter.
Okay, thank you. So you have that information then? Okay, thank you, Elsa. Okay, any other members of the public who wish to be addressing this tonight? No? Okay. I'm now going to ask members of committee if they have any oral or written submissions on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Please note the members of committee must make their comments now, as the LPAT may not consider comments made during a planning, building, environmental meeting and or any other council or committee meetings. So are there questions? Councillor Rayner, I'd like to go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mr. Orima. You mentioned that the lot sizes have to be 1 hectare. Is that not correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, the official plan, and I believe the regional official plan, has a minimum lot size of 1 hectare in the hamlets, unless you complete a hydrogeological study, which can identify that a septic system can fit on a smaller lot size down to 1 acre lots. So Mr. Bosher in this application has submitted a hydrogeological study saying that 1.5 acre lots is adequate enough to handle the sewage treatment systems without impacting any neighboring wells or drinking water features in this area.
Through you, so the purpose of that was to put an extra house in there?
Through the chair, I haven't done any calculations on, I guess it's about 2.5 acres is 1 hectare, so to accommodate more housing.
That's what it sounds like to me. Through you, Madam Chair, again, out in the country, when you have a surplus farm dwelling severance, you have 1 acre. Why does a hamlet have to have 2.47 acres, which is the equivalent of 1 hectare? Why would the sewage problems be different in a hamlet than they would for somebody out in the country?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe it's due to the concentration of septic beds within hamlets and wells, that the seepage can be a worse issue in a hamlet, so the hamlet lot size needs to be larger unless they can prove a smaller lot size will not impact existing development, whereas on a surplus farm dwelling severance, usually it's a farmhouse on a larger lot with much greater separations between wells and other septic beds.
Thank you, Mr. Borman. Mr. Treble, did you want to add to that?
Only, Madam Chair, just really quickly, the calculation is looking at the concentration of nitrates. And so the concern is that the more beds, the higher the nitrate levels, and that causes concern. And hence, as Garrett said, it's a concentration issue that they're looking at. And in hamlets, you sort of start at a higher number, assuming that you need to have less dense developments because there's a lot of smaller postage stamp size lots compared to what are permitted today. And only through the justification can you reduce that minimum number. So it's meant to look at nitrates and concentration of nitrates. Usually at lot lines is where the measurements are taken.
Okay, thank you. Are there any, Councillor Trombetta?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application, we usually don't see too many of them come in the hamlet areas, but, the one issue I do have is obviously, which is a lot of the residents have concerned, is drainage issues. There was one that came up in Smithville, was a development issue, and we just got it off because of drainage issues for 12 years they've been going on. And, it ties up a lot of staff's time. Fences get built, pools get installed throughout the process, and it drains out all these properties, and the township's left to deal with all these repercussions from these sort of things. Especially, big lots like this, the drainage can be very altered and flood these existing homes that are facing Mountain Street here. So I do have a little bit of an issue with this application. The other question I had through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Borma, is what's this warning clause that you stated in your presentation. We're giving out warning clauses saying that if you're coming to the country, be prepared, it's going to smell. Like, I don't understand what that means.
Mr. Vorma.
Through you, believe it or not, those warning clauses are sometimes needed. I'm not sure how effective they are, but the region often requests them, even on applications within Smithville. The current application on Town Line Road there, done by Dahan Homes, has the same requirement for warning clauses for agricultural activities being nearby. So we did get some additional requests from other farmers in the area asking for probably more elaborate warning clauses, and the director and myself have yet to really go through those to see what we can and cannot put in as warning agreements when down the road purchasers come to purchase these lots. Then on the purchase of sale agreement, then there'll be a warning clause saying that there are agricultural activities surrounding this. And
that's news to me. I've never heard about a warning clause, and maybe we can get some more future information on the warning clauses, because that's kind of took me out in left field a bit here. Anyways.
Yes and no, because in the short time that I've been here, we've had people complain about the trains going through town. They purchased homes and weren't aware about the train going through. And
but was there warning clauses in there for that?
well, I think they would like to. They wish that there had been warning clauses. One of the, we've had several people tell us as we door knocked during the last election as well. I wish I had known. I never would have bought this. But so maybe it's a protection issue.
It's also that too, and not that I just see the warning clauses, and and again, these are, even though these are in place sometimes, it still falls back on the township. So that's my major concern with this. The one major concern, like I did state in my previous thing, was the drainage, and I'd like some real further information on how we're going to mitigate all this drainage coming to these front properties. I'm surprised that there's not more residents here about this plan of condominium. So anyways, those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Treble wanted to speak again, I think, in connection with that, perhaps.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of points, I guess. The concept of warning clauses are, not necessarily anything that hold a lot of water at the end of the day, but it would be my desire that we somehow alert the people that are looking at purchasing properties that they may be purchasing in an area that may have an occasional smell, and quite frankly, that's the way it is in West Lincoln. You're going to have farmers and you're going to have non-farmers, and the farmer has a right to be there, and so the warning clause gives us a way of saying that you were notified that you needed to be prepared for the odd smell. In the situation, Madam Chair, that you're referring to, I know specifically the file, and there was an accusation that the warning clause was not there, and had the warning clause been provided, I would never have bought. So there may be an argument that there is some benefit to warning clauses. Not convinced on that, but it is better as a protection for the farmer who has the right to be there. That's number one. Number two, my understanding is, and Angela can perhaps clarify this, my understanding is there is a drainage issue. It's been alluded to already, and it has been caused on Mr. Bosher by his neighbors. It's not caused by Mr. Bosher. His water used to flow north and now cannot because of an obstruction that's been put in place by the neighbors. So Mr. Bosher is attempting to resolve an issue that isn't necessarily of his own making. And by the end of this process, hopefully we'll have an improved situation to what we have right now.
Okay. Just for the follow-up, just one more thing, because Director Treble had mentioned something. The warning clause, once you do sign off, you build your house, when you do a purchase and resale your home, does that get grandfathered down, or is it automatically obsolete afterwards?
Madam Chair, through you, I'm perhaps of two minds on this. The subdivision agreements, we never take off title, and the warning clauses will be listed in the subdivision agreement as required documentation. So in theory, they should exist at the time of every purchase and sale. If the lawyers were doing their job and doing their homework as part of the whole process, it should be raised and brought to light. I'm not convinced it always happens.
It never does. Okay. Anyways, those are my comments.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to, I don't know who actually. I'm curious about this pond that seems to be split on two lots, or will be. I don't know if we can get the image back up there. Garrett, but who's responsible for that? Like I looking here, I see that the lot line for the property looks like it just comes short before it. So maybe we can bring up the young lady there if she could.
Ms.
answer to
Bonamici,
this.
would you like to come back?
It looks like you guys, like, I'm hoping you have some kind of intention to maybe to block that out with a fence, but I'd love to hear your 2 cents behind what the plan is for that.
You're talking about the pond
Yes.
southwest? So when I said the majority of the land drains southwest, that's where it's going.
That's where the drainage.
And it just goes down here, follows into I believe a culvert, and then ends up to Regional Road 20. So that is its natural path, and that's,
So this is a storage drain? Is that what I'm understanding to some capacity? Like all the water that's running is filling in this pond. That's what's keeping.
yeah, but then it like continues
Eventually-
and exit. Yeah, this is my non-engineering answer for
No,
you.
no, that's understand- I just want to make sure that, I imagine if I'm moving into a neighborhood there and I see the lot with a pond there and I have kids, they're going to want to go for a swim. And if this something is, it's not very clear in the beginning, if it's dried out later in the summer, I'm obviously not familiar with that area. I just kind of curious what measures were what it was and how it's going to be protected. While I have you up here, the question about fencing, do you have any idea if they have plans or currently had plans to put fencing along that farming side as well as around each residence?
So that's a design detail and usually comes out during the site plan process. Municipalities usually request it. I'm sure it will be requested now because of that concern, and it is a valid concern. It's not really an issue with putting up a fence or not on our part.
Okay, and I'm going to ask through you again, Madam Chair, I'm going to ask you, do you know, is the intention here to sell these to the, general public, or is this going to be specifically to family in the beginning?
I believe one unit is to family, and then the rest would be open to the
Open?
market.
Okay, with the one to family, would you know, would it be number 1 with the shared pond?
I think it's number 2.
Oh, is it? Oh, right, around there. Okay, no, I was just curious, just considering where the location of the other house is. So, all right, I think that's all I have for now. Yeah, so I'm good, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Trimble?
Madam Chair, the only point I'll add is that it's pretty standard practice that the boundary of a settlement area becomes a fenced boundary. So I would anticipate the boundary between Mr. Petropoulos' property and this property will be fenced. The only question in there is an unopened road allowance that we need to tackle and bring a report back to Public Works Committee. And Maddie and I will be on that because that will influence where the fence actually
I was
ends
going to
up.
ask that. That's connected to this issue, isn't it? It's our unopened road allowance. Okay,
That's correct, Madam Chair. It's really related.
thank you. Okay. Councillor Jonker?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. We keep hearing about these clauses, but I think what we have to realize is those clauses, they're put there by a township saying, okay, we want to put a clause there, but at the end of the day, they're not our responsibility after to pass it on to the next person. That's the lawyer's jobs, right? And that's what we got to remind ourselves. Clauses are put onto properties, but when people buy, if they sell them after the second time or the third time, it falls to the lawyers to check these things out, not the townships to say, hey, there's a clause on that property, right? And that's something we got to remind ourselves too. The clauses are put there, but then it's the purchasers and their lawyers' responsibility to communicate that. And that does not fall back to the township. We have nothing to do with that after, if I understand correct, right?
Mr. Trimble, did you want to respond?
Madam Chair, I would agree with that statement that there is a binding agreement, but the obligation is on the parties that are purchasing the land to meet their obligations and do a due diligence as part of a purchase and sale process. Sometimes we're involved in providing a zoning compliance request, but not always anymore.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I just have one question that I want to ask. It actually is sort of a convoluted question, as you would probably guess, all about the drainage issue. Partly because as I read the justification report, there were, and then I looked at what the residents had to say, and I looked at what the township had to say, and I looked at what the region had to say, and drainage became a key issue. at various points, they were talking about the existing drainage and the issues there, that they will be addressed, and I think Ms. Bonamici covered that, and you've alluded to that too. My question is, very little has been talked about, although in the justification report, it did talk about post-development and the drainage. And so I'm just concerned about, with that slight gradient, if we have enough control over what can happen after the buildings are in. And I think I'm only not even so much asking this as a question, but as a reminder to staff that as we're looking at this and as you're working through that we've had these issues before. And although it's a little bit of buyer beware, as Councillor Jonker pointed out, the big issue is it is the township ultimately that people are going to be upset with if they have a drainage issue after the fact. And so I guess it's a caution as much as anything, that as we're working out that we remember that what looks good on paper sometimes doesn't work out quite as well as we hope. And so we need to be very cautious as we work forward on that although the drainage issue is important now, it's been important and mentioned many times, that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle of the rest of the project, because it's after the fact that the buildings are in and people are actually living in that we really see the true results of some drainage issues, I think.
Madam Chair, I won't belabor it. I think generally staff are on the same page. Normally grading is around 2%. In this case, it's like 0.25% or
very small, very small.
And so hence Public Works has red flagged the issue and asked for the full stormwater design plan, because it just on the simple review that's been done to date, it's just not adequate to understand the post issues.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Bonamici, you're well aware, right, that this is a huge issue at this point, and although you've alluded to not being an engineer, you know that the bottom line is that could be the very problematic area of this whole. Will you come up, please? Thank you. That way it's recorded. If you just talk from there, it's a big blank when the recording is done. Thank you.
With regards to our initial submission for our swim brief, we're aware of the town standard. Unfortunately, the property is very flat, and we don't want to raise the property to hit that standard. We do have a solution that we feel will work and that we can justify, which will be through our extensive swim brief. But that's for us in the town to, I guess, work through together. But we do have a solution that we feel will work and be to everyone's benefit, because it is an existing problem now. So either we leave it and it continues to flood, or we can fix it.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Rayner.
Thank you. One further question to the Director of Planning. The property in question that is applied to now to put housing on it, is it classified for tax purposes as residential?
Through you, Madam Chair, the property in question is within the hamlet area of, and it doesn't have a very fancy name, Region Road 12 settlement area, and is a combination of residential and commercial designation and zoning. So I would assume taxation as well, but that part's Treasury.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're moving on then. Please be advised that a technical report is being considered by committee this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future planning committee and/or council meeting. Please be advised that once the planning committee and/or council has made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There's an attendance sign-in sheet which is located at the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's committee meeting that you place a check mark in the column marked Bosher if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and/or decisions on this matter. Therefore, people who are interested in observing council and/or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend the meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a council and/or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-up sheet. This public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is concluded at the hour of 7:58. Okay, and I I see the mayor getting up. Do you need a brief recess? Okay, let's take a brief recess and maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
It won't work on the.
It was just a slight whatever. So when I started into it, it was like, but then before I finished that one, I checked 3. So I knew before I got to 3. Listen, that's minor, no big deal. Once we figured it out, it was just like.
Oh, scroll. You can use the scroll.
Right back, and then we're going to. Yeah, it's warm in here. Yeah, just let it go for a minute. I'm going to get right back. I just thought we'd give the others a chance to move out, but. It's really warm. Like it's almost 77 on this side. Yeah. Okay. Okay, these guys should.
Okay. Well, that was I think they had that meeting already. No, they're gonna. They're big ones. They're big files. Yeah, but it's not costing us. I don't know why that came. That was different. Yeah. We can get to the surplus land.
What about that issue anyway? We had. Yeah. I can tell you how many previous council members.
10 minutes.
They're different. Okay, we're going to go. Okay, we'd like to get this meeting going again. We still have a very full agenda. Okay, we're looking at appointments. Number 4, each scheduled appointment or presentation should be allocated a maximum of 10 minutes, and we have 2 this evening. So the first is item P66-19, Dave Hayworth from the Niagara region. Thank you, Mr. Borma. Maybe that will get... We've begun. Thank you. Mr. Hayworth.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Mayor, members of council, staff, and members of the public. I'm Dave Hayworth. I'm the official plan policy consultant for the region. And I'm developing the new regional official plan, and it's a pleasure to be here before our municipal partners to speak and provide an update on the new official plan. My colleague Sean Norman is in the audience, and he'll be following me with a presentation on the Natural Environment Background Study, which is one of the key background studies that will help inform the official plan. So we're creating a new official plan to implement provincial policy, reflect current goals and priorities of the community and regional council, and provide clear direction to our local planning partners with flexibility where appropriate. The reason we're doing a new official plan is back in the early 70s when the regional policy plan was born, the main mandate of the region at the time was preserving agricultural lands and defining urban boundaries. And over time, the regional planning mandate has grown as planning has become more comprehensive and more complex, and there's been downloading of planning responsibilities from the province to the region, and we want to be able to reflect those. So while the existing regional official plan has been amended to conform over time, those amendments have been done on an outdated platform. So we want to create a new, more contemporary platform that's more user-friendly. So this slide basically reflects the existing timeline from when Regional Council allocated resources. In March of 2019, the Regional Planning Committee and then Regional Council approved an official plan consultation timeline framework, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. So this slide basically shows the priority background studies that are on the way right now. There's 4 under growth management and 4 under rural and natural systems, which I'll talk a bit about as we move along. I will say that there's already been studies done, such as the water and wastewater master plan that will inform the new regional official plan, as well as the transportation master plan that will inform the plan. There's also other areas that we're working on that are still need to be done, are less of a priority. Cultural heritage is one that's important as well. We're working on a discussion paper for cultural heritage. And one thing we are doing for that section is we've undertaken and hired a consulting firm to undertake an archaeological management plan. There's only 3 municipalities in the region, Fort Erie, Niagara-on-the-Lake, and Pelham, that have archaeological management plans. We feel there can be a lot of issues avoided, and things can be easier for the local planning departments if we complete an archaeological management plan for the region. So we're in the process of developing that plan now. So this slide basically shows our timelines that we're following on a high level. We're at the background study stage now, having consultations. In 2020, we want to take the information from the background studies, develop draft policies and mapping for various sections separately, then there'll be consultation. And then we'll pull those sections together in a comprehensive draft early in 2021. That'll give us a year of back and forth revisions and discussions with our local planning partners with a comprehensive plan, hopefully to get it approved at the end of 2021. So we talked about the priority background studies. I'll quickly go over them. Under growth management, there'll be a land needs assessment or land budget, and we want to determine the amount of land needed for residential and employment growth to 2041. We want to establish a process to address urban boundary expansion requests. And from a high level, quickly, under the old growth plan, urban boundary expansions had to be completely addressed through the municipal comprehensive review or the new official plan process. The new growth plan that has come out has made some amendments in terms of expansions and adjustments and hamlet boundary refinements, subject to certain criteria, and you still need background studies and you still have to justify need. But there's an avenue potentially under certain circumstances where they may proceed in advance of this plan. So we're working on a framework now, as we know there's a lot of interest in that area and we may be getting requests. So urban structure is another important component, and that's to identify strategic areas to direct growth and intensification. We'll be implementing that through the local secondary plan process. And these are areas where we want to direct more intensification that are serviced by public transit, community facilities, and appropriate infrastructure to take advantage of that. And identifying those areas allows us to help protect established neighborhoods because we're strategically putting the intensification in specified areas. This slide basically shows a high-level preliminary urban structure, an urban growth center, which would be downtown St. Catharines, that's provincially identified, regional centers, which could be downtown Niagara Falls, downtown Welland, the GO Transit station areas where we've done the 4 secondary plans with our local municipal partners, strategic growth areas, that could be the Brock District Plan area where we've done a district plan, as well as the Glendale District Plan area where we're doing one now. And then, of course, the local centers and local corridors that our partners want to identify in their official plans. We're also doing an employment land needs strategy. what we're responsible to do is identify employment areas for long-term protection. So they're protected from conversion unless they go through a regional official plan. We've been working with our local area planners to help identify those areas. We look at targeting discussion paper or preliminary options, et cetera, for that for the end of 2019. Growth management, the housing strategy, we want to plan for appropriate range and mix of housing forms to provide choice, affordable options, and aging in place. We want to align with the region's housing and homeless action plan. So part of this exercise is what we wanted to do is know what the numbers and core data is. What's the core housing needs? So we hired a consulting firm to develop or pull that data together for us and do some analysis. And that data has been shared with the local planning departments, and I believe if it hasn't been shared with the municipalities, it will be very soon. Rural and natural systems we're doing an agricultural background study and discussion paper. We want to inform the identification and protection of our agricultural land and support the agricultural industry as one of the primary drivers of Niagara's economy. We're looking at that for the spring of 2019. We're initiating that, and hopefully we'll have something of substance to talk about in the fall of 2019. We think our agricultural policies are quite contemporary, but we want to do a conformity exercise based on all the changes with that's been undertaken at the provincial level. Natural environment, I'm going to let Sean talk about that because he's following me. Aggregate resources, we started State of Aggregates in Niagara Region back in 2016. That was completed, and then the province came out with the comprehensive provincial plan reviews in 2017, so the policies changed. We did a technical addendum in the spring of 2018, and now we're at the stage where we're drafting some draft policies, which probably should be done in the next 2 or 3 months. Climate change, that's a very large, complex issue to address, of course. This slide shows all the different sections of the official plan which impact climate change, from infrastructure, complete communities, addressing greenhouse gas emissions, the natural environment, which plays an important role, obviously, energy and transportation. Public transportation, obviously, is very important. Consultation, as I mentioned, Regional Council approved a consultation framework in March of 2019. It was built on Imagine Niagara consultations, which had taken place a few years earlier, and that was based on over 4,000 survey results and about 3,000 comments all across the region, identifying what was important from a planning perspective to the communities in Niagara. And you can see that those are the themes that were identified. They have been kind of confirmed through the Shape Niagara process in most part. And now we think we know what's important. So when we go to the public now, we want to go to them with some background and then some options and something of substance for them to be able to comment on. This is our public consultation timeline. As I again mentioned, the background studies, the draft policies, and then the draft consolidation. And our next steps, as you can see on the slide. This is our preliminary framework for the new official plan. You can see the different areas we're addressing under a growing region, growth, connected region, transportation and linear infrastructure, competitive region, the economy basically, vibrant region, cultural heritage, sustainable region, natural environment, climate change, etc. And that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Wiener?
Thank you. Sir, thank you for your presentation, but I think the region has a conflict of interest. You had mentioned, and I wrote it down, support the ag industry as a primary driver of the Niagara's economy, but yet you want urban growth, which results in the destruction of agricultural land in order to put subdivisions on it. A prime example would be if you go down Highway 20 and you just pass Allenburg, You go around the bend, there's a railway tracks, there's a stoplight, there's a Pioneer station there. Just before you get into Niagara Falls, there's a stretch on the other side of the road, about 500 acres, that's been destroyed last year. There's a big sign up now that it's going to be a massive subdivision. How can you destroy massive amount of agricultural land and have a statement that says support the ag industry as a primary driver of Niagara's economy when you're destroying the driver of the Niagara's economy?
Through the chair
Mr.
to the
Hayward.
councillor, I'm not sure of the exact locations you're talking about, but basically, there are areas in urban areas where they may continue to be farmed even though they're in an urban settlement area, but they've long since been identified that they're in an urban settlement area, so they are intended for urban development. Providing compact urban development, complete communities, and making sure when we expand our boundaries it's necessary and is appropriate and good planning helps protect agricultural lands and protects agriculture as a primary driver. It's all about balance. Another example would be we are currently, and regional council has been dealt with this and asked staff to move ahead on this. The winery industry is very important to Niagara. So as supporting agriculture as a primary driver, even though there's 96 wineries in Niagara, I believe there's over 30 that are in the Niagara Escarpment. The rules are not the same in the Niagara Escarpment as for the rest of the wineries in the Greenbelt Plan area. They're more stringent. So we want to work with the Escarpment Commission and try and even out those policies so it's a level playing field. That's another way we're supporting agriculture as one of the key primary drivers of the economy.
I know you have a process, through you, Madam Chair, I know you have a process and procedure to justify on paper, and I guess in the minds of especially those who do not have a love, appreciation, and respect of agriculture, that you can do urban expansion, and it does justify the destruction of the land. But you can't say that you support the ag industry by destroying 500 or 1,000 fields of productive soybeans and say you're really looking after the agricultural industry. Because if you're killing something that you support, you can't have the love in that. So you're just justifying because you need to expand, but you're destroying because you want to, because that's the only way you can expand, and the thing that gets destroyed is the agricultural land because it's in the way. And that's a sad thing to see. Because regardless if you have fruit, vegetables, or meat, all the food that feeds the human race comes from the land. And when you keep destroying it, it won't happen in my generation, it won't happen in the next generation, but eventually you will end up getting rid of so much that you will not have enough food to feed the billions of people that live in this world. And this is an example because Niagara is rich in agriculture. And we've got beautiful land. Look at below the escarpment. When I was a kid, that used to be orchards from Hamilton to St. Catharines. Now all they are is commercial buildings and Costco's and everything else. The best land that we've got around here, not the crappy land like we've got up. Well, sorry, the mayor says our land out here is great. Our land's not bad, but it's not near I was director of operations for E.D. Smith Fruit Farm in Winona. I can tell you beautiful soil that'll grow strawberries. You can't grow strawberries up here, but we're destroying the best land because it's more convenient and it's close to the QEW. I know the region likes to think that they justify what they're doing, but for somebody who's had a background in agriculture, it's a massacre. And I just can't accept statements like support the ag industry when they've got massive subdivision signs everywhere and land's being ripped up like it's worthless.
Okay, Councillor, I think you've made your point. Thank
I've made
you.
my point.
You certainly did. Okay. Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Hayward.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Norman. This is item P67-19, Sean Norman, Niagara Region, and the presentation is Niagara Environmental Background Study for the Regional Official Plan.
Good evening, Chair and members of committee. My name is Sean Norman. I'm Senior Planner in Community and Long Range Planning at Niagara Region. I'm here this evening to provide you a brief overview of the Natural Environment Work Program that is being undertaken in support of the new Niagara Official Plan, as well as to provide a summary of some of the key findings of the background study that is being completed. Before I go into more detail on the scope of work, I would like to briefly present some of the reasons why natural environment planning is such an important component of the new Niagara official plan. Firstly, natural environment planning supports the identification of areas for growth and development. For example, at a regional level, it helps identify where new growth areas should be. Secondly, there are a range of provincial requirements that must be implemented by the region. The third bullet point refers to the important ecosystem level role that natural systems play in our daily lives. As you know, agriculture, tourism, and other industries in Niagara rely on clean water and air for their success. Natural environment planning supports the vitality of these industries by ensuring that there is a healthy natural environment for the long term. Fourthly, there is a link between the natural environment and human health, both physical and mental. Natural environment planning ensures that the green spaces required for the well-being of Niagara residents will be available for generations to come. Finally, planning for climate change will be a common theme throughout the new official plan and will be addressed in each one of our work plans. We are striving to better understand the connection between natural environment planning and climate change. The definition of natural environment can mean something different to everyone. To ensure that the scope of the work program would be well understood, we attempted to clearly define it as an early step in the project. In scope includes all of the environmental features and environmental systems as generally defined by the province. Some of the identified topics are very extensive. For example, natural heritage features includes woodlands, wetlands, habitat, valley lands, areas of natural and scientific interest, and more. What is being presented on this slide is an overview of the key phases of the work program. The processes being undertaken is generally the same as would be used for any other planning or scientific study. Information is collected, options are developed and analyzed, and an implementation plan is created for the preferred option. In addition, there are a number of major points of engagement that will be used to inform the technical aspects of the project. As highlighted, we are currently on phase 3 and are striving to inform and educate our stakeholders and partners on some of the key issues and topics related to natural environment planning in the region. At this stage, we have not developed options for evaluation and have yet to prepare draft policies. That work will be done during later phases of the project. The Natural Environment Background Study, in addition to discussion papers on mapping and watershed planning, will form the basis of the project moving forward. Their purpose is to ensure that policy development will be informed by science and best available information. The scope of the background study was prepared in consultation with planning staff at each municipality and covers both general topics as well as issues and trends that are specific to Niagara. Some of the key topics will be overviewed in the next few slides. Much of the direction for natural environment planning is provided by the province. Provincial direction starts with the provincial policy statement. The PPS identifies the types of natural features, areas, functions, and systems that must be identified and protected. In some areas, the province has identified more detailed natural heritage systems and policies. In Niagara, we are responsible for implementing the provincial Greenbelt Natural Heritage System and the provincial Growth Plan Natural Heritage System. The Greenbelt NHS has been in place for a number of years and is generally reflected in existing regional policies. The Growth Plan NHS is new and is being implemented in the new Niagara official plan for the first time. Finally, the province provides a number of guidelines and other tools to support municipalities. These include, for example, the Natural Heritage Reference Manual and Greenbelt Technical Papers. As the two primary land uses in the rural areas of the region, it is critical to develop natural environment and agricultural systems which are compatible with one another. Provincial direction and existing regional policies are generally clear that natural heritage policies are not intended to restrict agricultural operations. For example, Policy 2.1.9 of the PPS provides specific direction that natural heritage policies of the PPS are not intended to limit the ability of agricultural uses to continue. Further, there are many exemptions in both the Greenbelt and Growth Plan NHSs related to agricultural buildings and structures. Finally, there is a common misconception that where a buffer is required between a new agricultural building and a natural feature, that it must be natural vegetation. In fact, both the Greenbelt Plan and Growth Plan both include exemptions that state where the land will continue to be used for agricultural purposes, there's not a requirement for natural self-sustaining vegetation. Buffers in agricultural areas may continue to be planted with crops. Woodlands and other treed areas are often the most publicly valued components of a natural system. When considering woodlands to be protected through policy, it is significant woodlands which are considered to be key features. It is the responsibility of municipalities to identify and map significant woodlands, which is generally done through a two-step process. First, woodlands are identified and mapped based on defined criteria. Second, criteria are developed and applied to determine significance. Criteria can, for example, include proximity to other natural features and the size of the woodlot. Within the provincial NHSs, provincial policy for the protection of significant woodlands are to be used. Outside of provincial NHSs, municipalities are responsible for developing policies, which must be in conformance with the PPS. A related tool for the management and protection of trees and other woodlands are local and regional tree bylaws. The Municipal Act sets out clear parameters of what may be permitted in a regional tree bylaw and what may be permitted in a local tree bylaw. Outside of the new Niagara official plan, the region has recently initiated an update to the Regional Tree and Forest Conservation Bylaw. Following completion of the official plan, there would be a process to ensure proper alignment between these tools. Climate change and invasive species are recognized as two of the most significant threats to the natural environment and can often work in conjunction with one another to accelerate the deterioration of our natural areas. With respect to the relationship between natural environment and climate change, this generally means two things: planning to protect our natural areas from the impacts of climate change, and understanding that natural areas are an important tool for mitigation and resilience. For example, natural areas such as floodplains and wetlands can help mitigate the impacts of large storm events by storing stormwater, encouraging infiltration, and releasing it at more reasonable rates. There are many invasive species that are creating issues in Niagara, including Phragmites, garlic mustard, European buckthorn, and emerald ash borer. Directly controlling invasive species is difficult through the land use policies of official plans alone, and is typically better addressed through bylaws and other management tools. However, consideration needs to be given to how we classify woodlands and other areas that are in transition as a result of the impacts of invasive species. Watersheds are defined as an area that is drained by a river and its tributaries. The PPS requires that watersheds be the ecologically meaningful scale for integrated and long-term planning. Watershed planning provides a framework for the protection of water resources and the management of human and natural resources at a watershed scale. It is not a new concept. However, recent provincial changes have reinforced the need for watershed planning to better inform land use planning. The region will now have a lead role in coordinating watershed planning. A high priority discussion paper is being completed to better inform the updated process, roles, and responsibilities related to watershed planning. In addition to presentations to all the local councils, we will also be consulting with the public and other stakeholders. Following this process, we will be reporting back to Regional Council with everything that we have heard. The next steps are to complete this first point of engagement and to finalize the background study and high priority discussion papers. Based on all the input that we receive, we will begin to develop and evaluate various options for how natural systems and policies in the region could be developed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Are there any questions? Councillor Rayner, carefully, please.
I try to be careful, but yeah, move on. Through you to Mr. Norman. You mentioned invasive species. You mentioned the emerald ash borer. You did not mention gypsy moth.
Through to the chair, to the councilor, our report looks at a number of invasive species. I was just trying for the time that I have here, just trying to highlight a couple.
An
Our
example.
report looks at a full range that are an issue.
Thank you.
Through you to Mr. Norman. To my knowledge, there is nothing they can do to stop the emerald ash borer, to my knowledge, but there is with the gypsy moth. Is the region going to start to get involved in this in order to preserve the woodlots? A lot of farmers can't afford the cost. I had mine sprayed last week. In fact, I was right over top of the helicopters that landed on the truck to reload. Is the region going to come up with something? The government of Ontario used to do it until the NDP government came in years ago and they stopped it because prior to that they wanted to preserve the woodlot and oak trees are being slaughtered. Is there anything the region can do to help to compensate the farmers for the cost of the spray program in order to try to keep, we're going to lose the ash trees, but we can stop from losing the bur oak, the white oak, swamp oak, the red oak, all them can be protected with something that is known that will stop the invasive species from destroying these 100 and 150-year-old trees. If we're really sincere about preserving woodlots, I think the region needs to come to the table.
Through the chair to the councillor. I think, yeah, so to kind of answer that, in looking at invasive species wasn't really something that was part of natural environment planning in the region before, but certainly kind of through the early stages in this project, we had a lot of questions about invasive species, and so we added it to kind of our work program as something that we've looked at. So as I mentioned, we're still kind of in the early stages. We're just doing the research now, but what we've kind of come, Stephen, kind of our preliminary findings are, official plan policies, land use policies of the official plan aren't really kind of the best place to deal with something like invasive species. What we're really kind of finding is that those managed bylaws or other management tools that's likely going to be required moving forward. So that's something that's coming out through the work that we're doing now, and in terms of the ultimate steps of what bylaws or management tools we'll have. I certainly don't have the answers for that yet.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Mayor Bylsma?
I don't want to belabor it, and as you said, it wasn't necessarily the key focus, but you did touch on it, and Councillor Rayner did bring it up, so I want to provide just a little bit of clarity to the issue, and that is just simply the description of invasive, or the definition of invasive species is a species that's not native to the area that comes in. Emerald ash borer was a particular pest that we inherited from Asia, so our ash trees are not used to it, and so it's having devastating effects. Gypsy moth has been part and parcel of the North American landscape for a very long time, and that they go through cycles and stuff like that. So there are, the trees have the ability to withstand that for a year, a season, and sometimes we can help nature correct itself through spray programs and stuff like that. So just the ones that Mr. Norman did mention, Phragmites and emerald ash borer and some of these, even going back to the Dutch elm disease, they were imports, and that's why they had such a devastating effect, because the natural heritage of our, whether it's woodland or plants or soils and stuff like that, aren't necessarily able to address that in the short term. We hope that over time, there's, hybrid strength and different genetic programs that can run and provide that resistance. But for now, those ones are of key importance because of the inability of our own species to withstand the onslaught of something like emerald ash borer. But I just wanted to make a distinction. There are those regular pests, and there are the invasive species, which are foreign. So just for clarification, thanks.
Okay, I think we're done. So thank you to both of you gentlemen for coming and providing that information to us. I think reports are one thing. It's great when they come in, but it's also really nice to have those explained further. So thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is an opportunity for members of the public to address items that are on the agenda. So we have a period of time where if there is something on our agenda this evening that you wish to speak to, members of the public, this is your opportunity to do so. So is there anyone here tonight who does have an item on the agenda that they would wish to talk about? Okay. And we're moving on then to consent agenda items. All items listed below are considered to be routine and non-controversial and can be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests it, in which case the item will be removed from the consent resolution and considered immediately following the adoption. So, we ready? Okay. So, consent agenda items. Item P68-19, consent agenda item number 1, Heritage Committee minutes, January 29th, 2019. Number 2, the Multi-Municipal Wind Turbine Working Group minutes of February 14th, 2019. Number 3 is an information report, PD-091-19, an update on the plan of subdivision applications in the Northwest Quadrant. Number 4 is an information report, PD-100-19, Bill 108, More Homes, More Choice, Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan. Number 5 is a recommendation report, number RFD-CAO-02-219, PCP Milestone Tool Joining Resolution. Number 6 is a recommendation report, number PD 101-119, a request for inclusion of 2783 South Grimsby Road 7 into the urban study area, owner Adam Doulaban. Number 7 is a recommendation report, number PD-103-19, direction to proceed with secondary plan and planning study areas. And number 8 is a recommendation report, number PD-19, budget amendment, transfer from the building reserve to fund ongoing service level improvements to building permit process. So I need, after the recommendation, I'll do that the Planning, Building, Environmental Committee hereby approves the following consent agenda items. Items 1, 2, 3, and 4 be and are hereby received for information. And number 2, items 5, 6, 7, and 8 be and are hereby received, and the recommendations contained therein be adopted with the exception of items. So I first need a mover, Councillor Riley, and a seconder, Councillor Cody. Are there any exceptions? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All members in favor, please. Any opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, number 7, communications. Item P69-19, Reese Smithville Phase Bedrock remediation. It does say 2018 on our agenda. It should say 2017 Site Operations Summary Report, Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, Drinking Water and Environment Compliance Division, West Central Region. The recommendation that the letter dated May 13th, 2019, pardon me, from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, Drinking Water and Environmental Compliance Division, West Central Region, regarding Smithville Phase 4 Bedrock Remediation 2017 Site Operations Summary Report be received for information. So I need a mover, Councillor Bilsma, and a seconder, Councillor Riley. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. You certainly can speak to it if you wish, Councillor Mayor Bilsma, sorry.
So the vote is almost taken there, so I don't want to belabor it, but I want to just highlight for the newer councillors around the Horseshoe that if you want to find out a key chunk of the history of Smithville, this is a good report to read and have kind of tucked into the back of your mind. The PCB situation is going to be referenced often in the course of the term. Councillor Rayner, myself, reference it from time to time. It affects some of our developments, some of our concerns. Councillor Rayner's very proud of the fact that he knows what PCP stands for, and he'll probably mention it at some point, but it's biphenyls. Anyways, never.
Okay, well, I'm glad you clarified that, but I assumed that I thought the report was very thorough, and yes. I assumed that people had read that report. Yeah. So hopefully people have, and they are well aware.
I just wanted to highlight that that's one to kind of keep tucked, maybe pull it out of your file and put it in a different file, and because it will be referenced, and when I came across it the first time, I found it as a very interesting read. And it forms a good part of understanding how Smithville and West Lincoln are wired. So I just wanted to highlight that and just leave it at that comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I will call. It's just for information, but we still need to move the resolution. So all those in favor? And any opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to staff reports. Item P70-19, Planner 2, Garrett Bormer, and Director of Planning Building, Brian Treble. Report number PD-084-19, Technical Report, Comprehensive Zoning Bylaw, Housekeeping Amendments. The recommendation that report PD-084-19 regarding comprehensive zoning bylaw housekeeping amendments dated June 10th, 2019 be received, and that a recommendation report be prepared and presented to the Planning, Building, Environmental Committee once all agency and public comments have been received and reviewed. So we need a mover. Councillor Riley. And a seconder. Councillor Jonker. Is there any further discussion on this? Everyone asked their questions already? Okay. All those in favor? And opposed? Okay, that carries. Okay. Item P71-19, Planner Madison Etzel and Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble. Report number PD-090-19, Technical Report, Surinder Singh Dhaliwal, Owner, Niagara Planning Group, NPG, Heather Sewell, Agent, application for rezoning, file number 1601-008-19. The recommendation is 1, that report PD-090-19 regarding Surinder Singh Dhaliwal, Owner, Niagara Planning Group, Heather Sewell, Agent, application for rezoning, file number 1601-008-19, dated June 10th, 2019, be received, and 2, that a recommendation report be presented at a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting once all agency and public comments have been received. So are there any, I need a mover, sorry. Mayor Bylsma, and a seconder, Councillor Trombetta. Any further discussion on this item? No? Okay, I'll ask the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. That motion carries. Item C, item P72-19, Planner 2, Garrett Bormer, Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble. Report number PD-085-19, Technical Report, Fred and Joyce Boscher, application for rezoning, application for draft plan of condominium, Sunset Acres IBI Group, Agent, file number 1601-009-19, Zoning Bylaw Amendment, file number 2000-088-19, Vacant Land Plan of Condominium. And the recommendations are 1, that report PD-085-19 regarding Fred and Joyce Boscher, application for rezoning, application for draft plan of condominium, Sunset Acres IBI Group Agent, file number 1601-009-19, zoning bylaw amendment, file number 2000-088-19, plan of condominium dated June 10th, 2019, be received, and 2, that a recommendation report be presented at a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting once all agency and public comments have been received and once a minor boundary adjustment is approved and completed. So I need a mover for that. Councillor Riley, and a seconder, Councillor Jonker. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? And opposed? Okay, thank you. That motion also carries. D, item P73-19, Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble, report number PD-073-19. It's a recommendation report, the Township of West Lincoln's support for the creating of the Onayakara UNESCO Global Geopark. The recommendation is that report PD-073-19 regarding recommendation report, Township of West Lincoln support for creating the Onayakara UNESCO Global Geopark dated June 10th, 2019 be received, and that staff be and are hereby authorized to notify the aspiring Global Geopark Committee in Niagara of our support for the Global Geopark application. So I need a mover for that as well. Councillor Trombetta and Mayor Bylsma. Any discussion on this item? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to kind of, I guess, go on the record and say I don't fully support this, and I think part of it stems from the fact that I don't really see, and councillors and other staff that are here, please enlighten me. But I don't really see the benefit that it's going to serve West Lincoln. And the one thing I really am uncomfortable with is the uncertainty of what our financial contributions going to be moving forward with this, and what that's going to look like. I know we were given, I believe, ballpark figures of 100,000 or less between all the municipalities, but at the same time, that was just kind of a very casual, rough ball thing, and I don't want this to necessarily become like a similar situation, which we've heard a lot about when, you know, past members have talked about their experience of the YMCA commitment and what we're getting versus what we had to pay and all that stuff. So I'd really like to, I just don't fully support this at this time, and I think it's better if we, you know, play it safe. You know, I'm assuming something like this is something we can revisit down the road, but if we kind of move forward with this, I worry that we're tying ourselves into a financial commitment that we're unsure of what that financial commitment will be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Bylsma.
Well, then, I think contrary to that, I'm very much in support of that, and it's unfortunate that, just to, I guess, to get people up to speed, Director of Planning Brian Treble and myself had an opportunity to sit at a stakeholders meeting that was held at Balls Falls, probably give or take about 3 weeks ago, 2.5, 3 weeks ago, where stakeholders from right across the region assembled together and basically are advancing this Oniakra geopark. In terms, so I just wanted to address the stake that West Lincoln has in this and the benefit, and I think there is a sense in which when it comes to tourism in Niagara, West Lincoln has always kind of had this perceived unfortunate position that we can offer nothing to tourists coming to the Niagara region. And I think with the effect of climate change and a greater sensitivity to the environment, I think tourism is changing in the world. And I think this Oniakra initiative is addressing the subtle cultural changes that's taking place with respect to tourism in the world. So at one time, big and flashy, big old Niagara Falls with all of its neon signs and stuff like that. That was the nature of tourist attractions. It had, I'm going to say, a gaudy nature to it, because in my opinion, humble opinion, it's just my opinion, I would much rather say enjoy Balls Falls rather than Niagara Falls. Yeah, there's a lot more water going over Niagara Falls, but with it came that kind of over commercialized quality to it. These geoparks, if you do a little bit of research on them, tend to be off the beaten track. They tend to have, there's a certain spectacular nature to them, and so there's no doubt that the Oniakra particular geopark that's being proposed for the Niagara region has as its initial or as one of its attractions the Niagara Falls. But the beauty of it is they're looking at this regionally, and I think that as we've stated so often, for those of us who enjoy, say, driving down 20 Road and the way that it rolls through our countryside and rolls with the landscape rather than cut across the landscape, and with that we find great enjoyment just looking at the fields of soybeans when they come to yellow in September, or the wheat as it comes to yellow and brown in July, and all of that, the pastoral charm, the agricultural qualities. And after the first presentation that was made of Oniakra here in our council chambers, I spoke to the gentleman, Darren Platicus, about our tree inventory, and we've talked about that already this evening too. The fact that we have some of the largest reserves of Carolinian forests in West Lincoln for the Niagara region, to make that part of the sell and the charm of West Lincoln as a part of the geopark. And finally, and we heard in the stakeholders meeting too, that there are cultural part of this new quote-unquote tourism is for tourists to come and work alongside the people. So if you were to go to another country, you might actually live in a very humble dwelling or reside in a humble dwelling and shepherd for a day. One of the key things that was exciting to Darren Platicus about the Geopark, believe it or not, was our gleaners. The Niagara Christian Gleaners operation was an opportunity for tourists to travel from their various parts of the world to come to Niagara to see the production of foodstuffs turned into the dehydrating process. It's a fine little operation. On a side note, if you haven't had the chance to volunteer there, please take that opportunity. It is wonderful. But that was an opportunity that could fit with the Geopark as well. So it is beneficial to West Lincoln in our subtle and perhaps more natural environment. That is the type of tourism that the geoparks are dealing with and gearing toward, and then we have attractiveness in spades. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, this is a little bit different. It's dealing with a different type or nature to what tourism is becoming. Natural cheeses and natural yeast and small craft breweries and stuff like that. And so they're trying to basically draw people out of the big tourist traps and try to get them into much more naturalized settings. So just kind of to answer your question, again, I don't want to change your mind, but just provide some of that information, and hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, would you like to add to that?
Just to add to that, the recommendation as drafted by staff is not in any way intended to make a financial commitment. At this point in time, it's just a resolution of support for the concept of making the application. Financial commitments will have to be a full deliberation and discussion before this committee in the future.
And the region has already supported this, I understand, right?
Yeah, they've done a lot of work trying to get the support and the stakeholders, and so they're getting support from business community, tourist community, investment, those kinds of things. So, very comprehensive.
All right, our CAO would like to weigh in.
Yes, I don't normally weigh into these, but if you're maybe more comfortable, we could add, you could do a request for a friendly amendment to say in principle, support in principle.
Okay, so we have it moved by Councillor Trombetta and seconded by the mayor that, do you agree to a friendly amendment to say support in principle as opposed to?
Yeah, obviously, there's always, I'm not against it, but obviously to see what the cost implications will be against townships. So, yeah, I do support it.
So as Mr. Treble has said, there's no cost involved at this point. So by saying we support in principle, that gives us.
I can't go through another YMCA for another 4 years here, so Madam Chair. So, yeah, I'd like to see in principle.
So the amendment is fine with you as the mover and as Mayor Bales as the seconder, so. Okay, I'm just looking. Okay. Councillor Jonker, did you want to speak to this?
At the floor now.
I was going to wait till we debated if we're going to become, but I think at the presentation, they're basically what they're aiming for is the tourist industry to support it, right? So you want to advertise there. That's what their goal is, I believe, at the presentation was we want to organize this and hopefully a brewery or a winery in West Lincoln could say, hey, I want to be part of that. Here's a little, right? The members.
Yeah.
That. So that's what we'll have to wait and see. How does it financially get paid?
Right.
That's
which is the
in
reason
air.
for supporting in principle.
That's
okay.
right. But they're aiming for the tourist pie to pay for it. Right?
Councillor Riley.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. And Councillor Jonker is correct. I was looking it up a little bit later, or earlier, I should say. I know their plan was to get the Kickstarter from all the municipalities to get them through the first 18 to 24 months. And then after that, there would still be some kind of financial commitment. They were on the hopeful side that it would be reduced to whatever the number ended up being. And then on top of that, the goal was to get restaurants and hotels and all those other ones to pay a tourist fee. But at the same time, looking at the DNA makings of West Lincoln, I still don't fully see what we're gonna get other than the idea of it. At the same time, I also don't think West Lincoln embodies the idea of being a theme park and having people go through. So I did look into the background of this company, and some of the complaints were, and obviously in some of the more seven wonders of the world, such as Niagara Falls and stuff like that, but even more, I guess, globally, was that the traffic that it was drawing was actually ruining, I guess, the heritage of those communities. And then on top of that, it was also drawing a very different kind of business, not necessarily businesses that were generating even tens and 20s of jobs, but kind of one or two standoffs of people kind of running around trying to sell T-shirts or whatever it was that they were pestering people. And I don't imagine that necessarily happening to this degree here. But again, without there being something here, naturally, I assume, other than what Mr. Bilsma, Mayor Bilsma just said about the history in our trees, I would assume anything else would have to be somewhat artificial. And at the same time, I still don't see how that traffic is any traffic that I don't know. I don't necessarily want to say. I don't think West Lincoln is community you necessarily come to vacation at. I believe it's you live in, I don't know, and grow a family here. So that maybe it's just my perspective. I don't really see where that is going to benefit us. So again, I was still open to the idea, but I do like the idea of having the amendment in, as long as there's no way we're indirectly committing ourselves, so that there's something later that we, are realizing we didn't, know before, and then now we're stuck because of it. So. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on this? Our clerk is just preparing a resolution for us so that we have the amendment. Okay, so we have our same since Councillor Trombetta and Mayor Bilsma have agreed to the friendly amendment. So the motion now reads that item P79-19 be amended to include the following addition: that support for the motion related to item PD-073-19 represents support for creating the Oneiagarra UNESCO Global Geopark be in principle only and not representing any financial commitment at this time. Fine with the mover? Fine with the seconder? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. Okay, thank you for that. Moving on then, we're on item E, which is item P74-19, Directive Planning and Building Brian Treble, report number PD-054-19. It's a recommendation report, the commencement of public consultation for winery, brewery, and special occasion policies and regulations for inclusion in the Township of West Lincoln official plan and zoning bylaw. The recommendation is that 1, report PD-054-19 regarding recommendation report, commencement of public consultation for winery, brewery, and special occasion policies and regulations for inclusion in the Township of West Lincoln official plan and zoning bylaw dated June 10th, 2019 be received, and 2, that staff be authorized to hold a public meeting at a future Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting whereby winery, brewery, and special occasion policies and regulations similar to those presented at attachment 3 may be considered in order to commence discussions and deliberations on these new policies and regulations. So I need a mover for that. Councillor Riley, and a seconder. Councillor Trombetta. All right, any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that report carries. Okay, F, item P75-19, Planner Madison Etzel and Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble, re-report number PD-089-19, recommendation report Sandra Gibson, application for rezoning, file number 1601-002-19. The recommendation 1, that report PD-89-19 regarding Sandra Gibson application for rezoning, file number 1601 002-19 dated June 10th, 2019 be received, and 2, that Section 34, subsection 17 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and 3, that application for zoning bylaw amendment 1601-002-19 submitted by Stephen Bedford be approved. So I need a mover, please. Councillor Riley. And a seconder, Mayor Billsman. Any discussion on this item? Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item came up, was it last month? We had the public meeting in regards to this. Again, this is something that affects me personally. I believe if this does get accepted, that us as council is setting the precedence for all of West Lincoln. Just like when the turbines came, you know, we didn't have a say, and they got placed in our areas where majority of the public wanted their say and didn't want them, but the Liberals decided to implement them on us, and they're here. But now we have a chance to have a say on this. Again, this is something that's been brought down by the Liberal government, that, these facilities coming out, and yes, they're all approved, and there's nothing, and talking to Brian, I understand that there's nothing that's, they're federally wrong that they're submitting, because it meets all federal requirements, but I believe that it's setting the precedence for this township. It's another thing that's been pushed down our throats by the federal government. I am not in support of this, and nor I will be approving this. I do think if it does get approved by all members of council tonight, we are really setting the scope for what's to come for this term and in the future for West Lincoln. So I want that to be noted, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do think it's worth noting, I believe this is, even though it was, I think, originated through the federal government, I do believe it's endorsed through the provincial government. In fact, I believe some of the, the new slogan that we're probably going to have to wear on our license plates is going to be a place to grow. And so I think that kind of embodies that, even if that was indirectly determined or decided on. But that being said, I think if I remember correctly, last time when we debated this, I don't think we can necessarily. I think it was actually Councillor Cody who probably said it best. And if this is the direction that we're gonna have to. Sorry, and Councillor Cody, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you mentioned something along the lines of this is probably the direction we would like to go in if we have to have this forced upon us one way or another. This is a significantly small facility. The people are going to be living there, and so that being the case, I think that's probably the best case out of a worst case situation, considering what is going to affect our community. So as much as I understand where Councillor Trombetta is coming from, at the same time, I feel that it isn't necessary. I think it's going to come back and bite us in the butt if we try to go against this. They complied with everything. So to the best of my knowledge here and what I've been given, I don't see how we can challenge this any more than that. So, but if it makes it any easier, I would like to call a recorded vote too. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any further comments? Councillor Rayner?
Thank you. I understand where Councillor Trombetta's coming from. I also understand where Councillor Cody was coming from. Of all the ones that are growing in this area, this is the smallest, micro size, easiest to monitor. But it's not that bothers me. It's the fact that there is a number of illegal ones in our township that need to be shut down. It sets a precedence against somebody like this who comes and follows the procedures and has got to go through the ringer, so to speak, to come to the horseshoe and be heard. These other ones cowardly just do their own thing. They also live in those places and stink up the whole neighborhood. And I know there's a number of people here who can name probably a half a dozen, and that needs to be addressed. But let's go back to the illustrious Prime Minister that we have who rammed this down on us. And it was supposed to be Health Canada that monitored it so that the protection of the people who lived around it, in other words, they can enjoy their life and the rights and freedoms that they have, which the Trudeaus loved with the rights and freedoms thing, to go outside and take a breath of air without gagging. And yet when you call Health Canada that there is a stink next door, they do absolutely nothing. That's the part that I'm objecting to this about, is the fact that had it have been properly done with a respectable leadership that would have ensured that what he passed was enforced like it was supposed to be, then we would have something that we would feel much safer about. But should this happen, even though it's a micro, to be a stinking smelly place that blows down wind, there is nothing that our illustrious leader is going to do with his people to prevent this from happening. So this is where I have the problem, is the lack of follow-through, and most important, the lack of enforcement. So it's only for that principle at this time that I cannot support this, because I don't know if there's anything you can do down the road if it gets out of hand that we can even stop it. Thank you.
Mr. Treble.
Madam Chair, just to speak very briefly, this application, as I think Councillor Rayner has stated, has followed proper process, has not started in advance, is applying for approval before they actually commence operations. So they're doing it the right way, and for that I think they should be commended. I cannot and will not speak to the enforcement actions that staff are taking in open session. We can certainly have a discussion at the appropriate time in closed session, but there are a number, and we are working towards getting those through the court process. So there's no reward, hopefully, by following the illegal route, and hopefully there is seen to be some merit in at least applying and going the proper way.
Thank you. And I think if you're looking at terms of what Ms. Gibson laid out, if you actually read through the regulations, she has a great many steps to follow before she's actually able to build the facility. And before she can do that, all the security clearances and things need to be taken. And just a reminder that that license is not actually given until that final inspection is done. So at this point in time, there's a lot of time and investment in terms of getting towards that process. So I think you're right. She needs to be commended for following the right process. We've dealt with enough of the others, and she shouldn't be faulted because of what others have done in her place. Any further comments? Councillor Trombetta?
Sorry to again, Madam Chair. Again, I did state I'm not going to be approving it, but at least now that I can state that, if a future application comes forward and they are approved, because we're setting the precedents now, I can still say as a councillor that I rejected it, and that I had rejected the first one. And I'm glad Councillor Riley asked for a recorded vote, because when those residents are going to be in here complaining that a new facility is going beside their property, and once we approve one, we have no grounds to say that we can't approve the other one, and so on and so forth in the future.
Well, we can in that they have to follow the process too. I guess the process is our protection.
Correct, but we have none now, and I'd like to keep West Lincoln that way. So again, I won't be approving it. I'm glad Councillor Riley asked for a recorded vote so it can be recorded, and we'll see where it goes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Once again, I just want to say, and you said it quite clearly, Madam Chair, you said the process is our protection, but it's not our protection, because Health Canada, should this odor come out, will not protect us. The process, these people deserve credit. They've done it the right way. They were upfront, they were honest, they were trustworthy, which is a lot better than one heck of a lot that's people that are doing something right now out there, and they deserve as much as we can do. But as they say, I am sure that the planning department and bylaw enforcement are doing everything they legally can. But the point is, this person has gone out of their way to do the process right. And that, in your mind, is the process is our protection. But in my mind, it's one step further. If they're following everything and the odor does get out, which I believe like the one down from Claire's Motors on Highway 20 going to Font Hill does, I'm sure they got approved. I'm sure they got their license. But there's absolutely no protection from people. You go by there, it's just about gag in one direction. It's in the west, one direction. It depends on the wind. It's awful down there. But the protection's not there, because Health Canada is supposed to be the backup to ensure that this is enforced, and it's not being done. So should this get out of control, we have nothing to go on. So that's where I'm concerned. Had there been, I would be fine with this, because they've done everything the right way. But if it gets out of control, we have no protection from the federal government. And the examples have been in the past where everybody has asked and they have gotten it. And so it's not that I'm speaking out of tune. They have asked for help. Health Canada has ignored the residents, and they're stuck with it, and that's wrong.
Okay, and so and I'm not saying whether I'm supporting or not supporting this, but the one thing that was very clear in the presentations and in the public meeting is that what you're referring to and what most of us are complaining about when we drive by are very often greenhouses, and this is a different sort of facility. This is a micro facility. We did visit the one which is not even classified as micro, I don't think, but up Highway 6, and there was no odor coming from that facility. Those of us who visited, it was fine. I envision that that's probably what Ms. Gibson is trying to do as well. I don't know that. Mr. Treble, you may know more about that.
I think it's probably in that same vein, only presumably not even as large as the one that we traveled to. If I could just add one other statement as well. West Lincoln does have a set of fairly high and fairly rigid standards, and we'll get into that a little bit later on when it comes to the cannabis stuff. Other municipalities, such as our neighbors to the east and to the northeast, did not put in place similar provisions. So where we're saying that the operation has to be at least 150 meters away from lot lines and therefore even further away from residential units, the other municipalities have them basically right on your doorstep. So, we've done things, I think, a little bit better from the get-go, which I'm hoping helps address some of the concerns of what could happen if. Here's hoping that doesn't happen, and this is not the operation that's going to cause that grief, but we won't know that for sure. But I don't think you should make your decision on the basis of the other operators that aren't even in the same character.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Cody.
Yeah, Councillor Trombetta feels that allowing this is opening the floodgates, if you will. I have a different opinion that allowing this allows us to say that we have looked at this and we have allowed a facility that we have deemed acceptable for our municipality. The fact is there's an appeals process, and by taking a hard line and just a prejudicial, we will never allow these, the only thing we're committing to do is spending enormous amounts of taxpayer dollars in appeals, in lawsuits, and eventually the company that wins that appeal or lawsuit might be a 20,000 square foot, 40,000 square foot mega facility. By allowing this facility, we can say we've looked at everything, they've met all of the restrictions we've put in place, and we feel this is the right decision for our municipality. And that gives us that ability to say we've not taken a prejudicial line. We have looked at it case by case and allowed the facilities we feel are best for our municipality and not allow the facilities we don't think fit.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think I asked this once, so I'll go through you back to Mr. Treble. And I'm just bringing it up on my phone here, so give me a second here. So would there be any added protection through the, we'll go with the Environmental Protection Act? Is that under adverse effects? Like, I just feel like if there is something that was causing that kind of impact to people, like I understand what's going on, and I actually, that company that's right by off of Highway 20 going into Pelham, like I think everyone knows, you can smell it, but they're definitely right on top of the road, and it's a huge facility, and you pay attention to their stocks, they're soaring through the roof, so they're definitely growing. I don't think this is a very fair one to compare to that by any capacity. So my question is, like, I feel like with what I've heard here, that we have no protection. I understand Health Canada's, to some extent, is not doing their job. And so that being the case, I feel like we do have more rights than possibly what's being alluded to. So I was just wondering if you knew anything further than just that. At the same time, before you answer, sorry, I do think we can't necessarily make the decision on what we think is going to happen. We haven't permitted anything so far, so we have no real reference other than what we're hearing or going by in other areas. So again, to echo Councillor Cody's comments, I agree that I believe this is setting precedence to this particular model. Should someone come in who want to build smaller and we say no to, they're going to be like, well, what are you talking about? Ours is half the size of the other one. Someone comes in and wants to try to build something 4 times bigger, we actually have this as a scale and say, no, we haven't permitted anything this big, and we do have that right still and that power. But anyways, so back to you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Trombetta about the Environmental Protection Act.
Mr. Treble, I think he meant you. Trombetta.
That's okay.
That's okay.
I'm just checking on my phone back to some communication I had with the planning director in Pelham after we had our last discussion because there was similar concern as you mentioned before. I don't have a specific answer, but what I can tell you is that the first point of enforcement is Health Canada, as I think Councillor Rayner has alluded to. But Pelham has recently had a roundtable where provincial and federal representatives were also at the table with Health Canada, and it's indicating the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, I think they are now, and OMAFRA were also at the table. And she's indicating that, of course, the other balance in this is the Normal Farm Practices Protection Board and the right to farm piece of the puzzle. So it's not a black and white enforcement matter, and it sounds like Pelham is working with all of the different agencies to try and find an enforcement mechanism. So, you know, I don't know that any one piece of legislation is our solution, or else they would have been all over it elsewhere. But I'm going to keep in touch with Pelham to make sure that we kind of understand the latest and greatest with respect to enforcement. I think that's the best I can probably say tonight.
Okay, so any further discussion? All right, it looks like we're done in terms of that, so Madam Clerk.
Councillor Cody.
Support.
Councillor Gannon.
Support.
Councillor Jonker.
Do not support.
Councillor Rayner. Councillor Riley.
Support.
Councillor Trombetta.
Not in support.
Mayor Boswell.
Opposed.
Okay, so that motion is lost. And I guess that, Mr. Tribble, then that leaves that up to you to deal with that, and the applicant then to deal with it in her way. Is that where we stand?
Madam Chair, certainly Council has to make the final ruling with respect to the vote. But if there is, either way, approval or denial causes the opportunity for an appeal. So
Okay.
the appeal mechanism is the option available.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, item P76-19. We're looking this time at Planner 1, Alexa Cooper, and Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble, re-report number PD-094-19. It's a recommendation report, the estate of Paul Mago, IBI Group Agent, zoning bylaw amendment, file number 1601-005-19. The recommendation is 1, that report PD-094-19 regarding the estate of Paul Mago, IBI Group Agent, zoning bylaw amendment, file number 1601-005-19, dated June 10th, 2019 be received, and that Section 34, subsection 17 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required. And 3, that a bylaw to implement zoning bylaw amendment application 1601-005-19 submitted by the estate of Paul Mago be approved. A mover, please, Councillor Rayner. And a seconder, Mayor Bylsma. Any discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And opposed? Okay, that vote carries. Okay. Item P78-19, Planner 2, Garrett Borman, Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble, re-report number PD-061-19. It's a recommendation report, Gulfcom Satellite, 2680 Clifford Street, amending site plan agreement and authorizing bylaw file number 2100-016-19. The recommendation is that report PD-061-19 regarding Gulfcom Satellite, 2680 Clifford Street, amending site plan amendment agreement, and authorizing bylaw file number 2100-016-19, dated June 10th, 2019 be received, and 2, that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the amending site plan agreement. A mover, please. Councillor Trombetta. And a seconder, Councillor Jonker. Any discussion on this issue? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And none are opposed, so that motion carries. Did I? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I did. I would just like to say, councillors, that when there's a discussion going on and you're having to keep track here, it's very difficult. It's also very difficult for the clerk to keep track of what's going on when there are sidebar conversations, especially this side of the room. These guys are a little further away. They can get away with it a little bit more, but it is very distracting.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Well, you do talk, but it's just not so distracting. Okay, so I did miss item H, P77-19, Planner Alexa Cooper, Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble, report number PD-095-19. It's a recommendation report, Loyal Creek, Kim Hessel's agent, zoning bylaw amendment, file number 1601-006-19. Recommendation 1, that report PD-095-19 regarding Loyal Creek, Kim Hessel's agent, zoning bylaw amendment, file number 1601-006-19, dated June 10th, 2019, be received, and 2, that section 34, subsection 17 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and 3, that a bylaw to implement zoning bylaw amendment application 1601-006-19 submitted by Loyal Creek be approved. So we need a mover, please. Councillor Jonker and a seconder. Councillor Riley. All those in favor? I didn't ask for discussion, but I assume. Okay. That motion carries. There are none opposed. Okay, moving on to number 9, other business. I presume that you have all read the recommendation report that was there, and it's very long, so hopefully I won't have to read all those whereases on the first one, because this bylaw did go in, or this law did go into effect with royal assent. Bill 108 is now law, and so although we still wanted to send a response, it has been changed. So we have a friendly amendment to this, and Councillor Riley, I presume that you still want to support this, and we need a seconder then, based on the new one. Councillor Cody. I was sort of thinking that too, but
We don't need it read.
actually you do need it read. Sorry. So, the recommendation relating to item P79-19 from the June 10th Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting be amended with the following changes. Recommendation, whereas the legislation that abolished the OMB and replaced it with the LPAT received unanimous all-party support, and whereas all parties recognize that local governments should have the authority to uphold their provincially approved official plans, to uphold their community-driven planning, and whereas Bill 108 allows an unelected unaccountable body to make decisions on how our communities evolve and grow. And whereas on August 21st, 2018, Minister Clark once again signed the MOU with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and entered into, and I quote, a legally binding agreement recognizing Ontario municipalities as a mature, accountable order of government, unquote. And whereas this MOU is enshrined in law as part of the Municipal Act, also in quotations, and recognizes that as public policy issues are complex and thus require coordinated responses, the province endorses the principle of regular consultation between Ontario and municipalities in relation to matters of mutual interest. And whereas by signing this agreement, the province made a commitment to cooperating with its municipal governments in considering new legislation or regulations that will have a municipal impact. And whereas Bill 108 impacts 15 different acts, Cannabis Control Act 2017, Conservation Authorities Act, Development Charges Act, Education Act, Endangered Species Act 2007, Environmental Assessment Act, Environmental Protection Act, Labor Relations Act 1995, Local Planning Appeal Tribunal Act 2017, Municipal Act 2001, Occupational Health and Safety Act, Ontario Heritage Act, Ontario Water Resources Act, Planning Act, Workplace Safety and Insurance Act 1997. And whereas the Communities Benefits Charge, CBC, needs to raise sufficient revenue to cover growth-related costs for services captured by the CBC. However, if it does not, critical infrastructure will be significantly delayed, the cost burden will be transferred to existing taxpayers and ratepayers, or the infrastructure will not be built at all. And whereas Bill 108 increases red tape, municipal resource needs, and the municipal reporting burden by introducing new reports, studies, and enforcement and collection mechanisms. And whereas there are clauses in Schedules 3, the Development Charges Act, and 12, Planning Act, of Bill 108 that will create substantial cash flow problems for municipalities. And whereas the timing of the prescribed transition date must be far enough in the future to ensure that municipalities have the time and resources to undertake the necessary steps to complete the required work related to Communities Benefits Charge, CBCs. Whereas the Township of West Lincoln is concerned that Bill 108 will have negative consequences on community building and proper planning. And whereas Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choice Act 2019, received royal assent on June 7th, 2019, be it resolved, no further, it's been stretched out, sorry, that the Township of West Lincoln calls upon the Government of Ontario to enable fulsome consultation with municipalities to ensure that its objectives for sound decision-making for housing growth that meets local needs will reasonably be achieved, and be it further resolved that the Township of West Lincoln also requests that the Government of Ontario undertake a fulsome and transparent stakeholder consultation process with municipalities on any draft regulations associated with the proposed Bill 108, as many of the key details regarding the mechanics of Bill 108 will be provided in regulation. And be it further resolved that a copy of this motion be sent to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honourable Christine Elliott, Deputy Premier, the Honourable Stephen Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs, the Honourable Andrea Horwath, Leader of the New Democratic Party, and all MPPs in the province of Ontario. And be it further resolved that a copy of this motion be sent to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, AMO, and all Ontario municipalities for their consideration, and that staff be authorized to proceed with sending this motion to the parties noted above prior to ratification of council. Got it. So, is there any discussion on this? Mayor Bylsma.
Yeah, so I do have, this is very complex. Obviously, the number of whereas is it's very comprehensive and fulsome. In the main, there are many things that I agree with in the whereases. I guess my number one concern is the province was elected to address, or one of their platforms was to address the housing crisis, and I want us to be cautious. Sometimes these things can kind of take on a mob mentality, but at the end of the day, the focus and the purpose behind this is to streamline and make more efficient housing choices and opportunities for developers to develop houses. I think we would all agree that houses have become much more difficult to purchase. I have children that are coming of age, and they're looking into the housing market. They're getting married. They're trying to buy houses. They literally find the one or two cheapest houses on the market, and that's where they're working, and the prices that they're paying for their houses are just mind-blowing to me, and so I look at this, and I understand how comprehensive Bill 108 is and has become now that it's received royal assent, and I understand the modifications. But I want us to be cautious that we can't speak out of both sides of our mouth and say on one hand, well, we need to be in support of affordable housing, and on the other hand, oppose the province's attempt at trying to address housing concerns. So I offer that as a caveat, and I guess at this point I'm going to oppose this, not necessarily because I find most of it offensive by any stretch of the meaning, but I think that I want to reflect the complexity of the issue, and I think we can do that safely around this table, the complexity of the issue that's being addressed, which is affordable housing. At the end of the day, I think it's incumbent upon our municipalities to proceed with some caution with respect to Bill 108 and not create the counterculture type response, which would leave the province in particular scratching their head going, are the municipalities serious about affordable housing issues, or is it just talk? And I want to make sure that we recognize in this room that the province is trying to deal with affordable housing. That we've very clearly, there have been policies that have been initiated in the past, and they have in principle a good nature about them. And I think of the Greenbelt Act have good intentions, but what they've done is they've landlocked municipalities so that the price of land is really at the driver of the unaffordable nature of many houses. And I had a conversation recently with Director of Planning, Brian Treble, who informed me that the cost of an acre building lot in our municipality with a building permit is upwards of $300,000 an acre. You don't have a 2x4, you don't have a hole dug, you have nothing. You just have a building lot, 1 acre in the countryside, no services, and you're paying over $300,000. That's your starting point. Then you have to build a structure on there at about $150 to $200 a square foot. A small bungalow is going to cost you $500,000. And that's created because many available lands in an honest attempt to protect agriculture and our natural features has been locked down, and foreign investors have taken advantage of that and driven up prices. And this is the provincial government response to alleviate some of that pressure. So I think I've said enough. I think you understand what I'm driving at. But if we're really serious about affordable housing, then we have to allow dialogue on this. And so that's why I've said what I said and why I will be opposing this.
Okay, Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try not to go as long. Actually, I'll make this very brief. I think, obviously, Mayor Bylsma and I will disagree here. I don't think this is actually going to give what they're promising. I think the provincial government's actually on track of doing one thing right, and that's consistently doing the wrong thing. That being said, I acknowledge that obviously change needs to happen in our province, but at the same time, I don't think handcuffing municipalities with this stuff is the way to do it. I also think that what are we sacrificing for the sake of, I guess, what they're going to be saving in home purchases and stuff like that. There's a lot of moving parts to this piece of paper, and if I didn't know any better, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think there's no coincidence that first, talk of amalgamation blended with all this other stuff that's going on. This is just to make it easier for them to, kind of run their personal agenda the way they can and get their, people kind of building up these communities without all the extra safeguards we had before, without the extra investment that would be required. And I think a lot of this is actually going to cost taxpayers a lot more, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to make the province, how they've set up everything else, look like a hero, because it's all going to be shifted over to the municipalities. So, like I said, no sense in me going back through dissecting everything else within this, but I just think that not supporting this is not necessarily the right thing. I think we have to speak out against this, and I think if we've seen anything in the last little while is that every other municipality seems to at least have that in common, and they're standing up against this, and I think we should too. So I'm going to strongly support this, obviously. Thank you.
Okay, any other further comments, questions? Mr. Treble, did you wish to say anything about the development charge issue of that? From my perspective, it is the changes to the development charges and the unknowns about the municipal benefit fund. I think if the details had come with that piece of it, I would feel better about the rest of it. But it seems that they are very certain about what we can use for development charges only, which will change how we do business here. And they haven't had the details, to my knowledge, about how the rest will work. So that piece was of importance to me.
Madam Chair, I think I would agree. Senior management has had some discussions around this issue, and our treasurer, I think, carries one large concern, and that is how do we get the money in that we need in order to pay for the servicing up front, especially when you have the concept of being able to pay in installments over 6 years and all the bookkeeping and tracking of that that has to occur. So that's, I think, the biggest part of the staff challenges as I've picked up on it. The only other thing I can add, Madam Chair, is from some of the discussions I've been having with other planners out there, I'm gathering that some municipalities were using the old Section 37 of the Planning Act, which was a bonusing section, and they were, I'm saying using it, but I think maybe the better word was abusing it. They were using the policies of the official plan to allow for artificially low building heights, and then having the developers negotiate with the municipality for each floor they wanted to achieve above that. And that's what this bonusing concept of old was considered. And so rather than, as we discussed last year, allowing for, I forget the numbers now, like 6 stories, and if you wanted to go more, you'd have to negotiate with the town to get to 9 or 10 or whatever number we actually put in that policy last year. Well, the City of Toronto, just, these are numbers, don't quote me on this, but like they were saying, okay, the maximum height's 20, knowing everybody was going to build 40. And so they were getting money for this, which was way above and beyond the concept, I believe. And that, I think, a few of those bad apples, not just the City of Toronto, City of Waterloo, City of Kitchener, those ones I think are part of what was the focus, and we're all getting caught kind of in this massive change as part of that whole review.
Thank you. Did you want to weigh in, Madam CAO?
Yes, thank you. I do. Just particularly because the whereas has just sort of set the framework, set the policy that's taken into effect so far. And I think that the resolution, the way it's worded now, is just asking that we be consulted as they come up with these next steps, as they define the new features of the regulations that are attached to the legislation. So from when this is written, when the agenda was prepared, and then with the passing of the legislation last Friday, the nuances are quite small, but there's it still talks to the request for fulsome consultation.
Okay, and I think that's the meat of what's going on here. I don't think that if we were to support this, I don't personally feel if I'm supporting this that I am anti-affordable housing. Believe me, I have had lots of input into that through the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee in terms of looking at what even the Niagara region is up at. So bottom line is, if there's no further discussion on this, we need to look at where we stand with that. So you have the resolution before you. You've heard it. I'm not reading it again. And you'll be happy about that. All those in favor of supporting this? Okay, and opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Okay, so the next item is just a verbal update from our Director of Planning and Building, Mr. Treble, about the RVL LPAT update. So,
yes,
Mr. Treble.
Madam Chair, in late May, we made a presentation before LPAT as a settlement of the development that RVL, Rick and Christina Van Leeuwen, and the township had agreed to at the corner of Spring Creek Road and Station Street at the north end of Smithville. We had achieved a settlement, and that was what was then presented before LPAT and the OMB. Our lawyers, including the lawyer for RVL, who are, I would say, two of the best in this part of Ontario, were not exactly sure how the process would unfold because of some of the rules and the differences depending on the type of application that we had before them. But the chair walked into the room at 11 o'clock, basically announced that he had read the file cover to cover. He had a series of questions, asked those, and 7 minutes later, an order verbally that everything's in full force and effect as settled upon between the parties. So in my 30 years of planning, that's a record. I've never seen an OMB hearing resolve that quickly. So this chair had an amazing handle on the file, and Mr. Van Leeuwen is now proceeding forward with site plan.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Treble on this file? Good news, for sure. Thank you. Okay, item P81-19 is members of committee, other business matters of an informative nature. So, Councillor Rayner? Councillor Trombetta? Councillor Riley? No? Any on this side? Councillor Cody? Jonker? No? Mayor Bilson? Oh, Councillor Jonker changed his mind. Okay, that's fine. I would just like to publicly thank staff. We had an amazing time with the Age-Friendly Advisory Forum, the Seniors Forum on Friday. And so staff, from the top down. So first of all, to you, Madam CAO, and to our Director of Finance, thank you for working out the insurance issues, which turned out to be probably smaller than they kind of shrunk over time. I want to say publicly that the staff at our community center were amazing to work with, extremely helpful. And so, kudos to them for the help. And we had about 150 people listen to our speaker. So we're very, very pleased with how that went. And people are already talking about the fact we should do another one next year. So just a quick update, but mainly a thank you to those who are involved. Okay, there are no other items, and so we are ready to move into confidential matters. So I need a motion to move into confidential. Councillor Trombetta, Councillor Riley, please. All those in favor? And that motion carries, and we are now in confidential.